It's WFUV and WFUV HD, New York. Listener-supported public media from Fordham, the Jesuit University of New York. Right here on 90.7 FM, WFUV.org, and WFUVSports.org. This is One on One, New York's longest-running sports call-in show on 90.7 FM, WFUV.org, and WFUVSports.org.
Welcome into One on One, New York's longest-running sports call-in show. I'm Ryan Gregoire, joined by Dylan Balsamo. Thomas Quigley will be joining us in a bit with some headlines, and we'll be with you from 11 to 2 a.m. on 90.7 FM, Facebook Live, and YouTube. And Dylan, when I saw the assignments, I got excited. It was me and you, I'm not going to lie. We've been doing the Nosebleeds podcast the last few weeks, talking baseball, but now we're talking a lot of different things, not just baseball, so I'm glad to be joined with you today.
Oh, it is always a pleasure just to hang out with you, Ryan. So to get to do one-on-one with you now, and what I believe is your first time hosting, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah.
It's an honor for myself to be a part of it. But yeah, we are talking about a lot today. There's, obviously there's baseball stuff. There's the NBA Finals. There's the Stanley Cup Finals have finished up. The Euros are finishing up, and you mentioned Talkin Baseball. We're going to be specifically talking about Talkin Baseball today.
Yeah, so we'll have some interviews that Dylan just alluded to. We'll start with Mets-Yankees, though. Two teams that right now, they look like they're going in positive directions. We say this a lot, and then by the next time we get a sentence out, it's changed. But Mets, they get 7 straight against the Pirates here, so pretty big for them coming up.
Absolutely. What's interesting is a lot of people were wondering when the Yankees and Mets met last weekend in the Subway Series, which team it was going to do something for. Who was going to get the Subway Series effect in a positive way. And it almost never happens for both of them, but this season, at least in this last week or so, it seemed like that's happened.
Yeah, it gave me massive, loser leaves town vibes, and that loser was the Yankees, but, they have came back a little bit. They've won 4 or 5 since then. They had a nice series versus the Mariners where the bats really came into play, and you just hope if you're the Yankees, that's a sign of things to come for the future.
Absolutely. It's interesting, and we're going to talk a little bit about this when we get into the segment in just a few minutes. But, they won that game 4-0 against the Astros last night. They had 12 hits in that game. Only scoring 4 runs, actually a bit of a disappointment, but at least it's somewhere in the right direction, especially after a series in Seattle that did show some real improvement. Yeah,
it's been the 2 outs with runners in scoring position, and you did see that even in the 4-0 win with a lot of guys left on base. And so when we're done with that, we're going to shift over to the NBA. Thomas Quigley is going to be joining us for that segment. Glad to have him a part of the show today. And the Suns lead 2-0 right now, Dylan. They're in the driver's seat in these finals, and they just have to kind of, in my opinion, split in Milwaukee and then go back to Phoenix and try to cap this thing off.
Absolutely. This is the Suns series to lose at this point. But, what's interesting is, at least to me, if you watch the game, this series is more evenly matched than it appears on paper with a 2-0 lead going on. This Bucks team is you can see why they're the Eastern Conference champions. They're quite good. And, they have this player. His name is Giannis, I believe it's pronounced. He's quite good himself. So, this is an incredibly fun series to watch, this NBA Finals. And, you like this Suns team. It's a great story. So it's great to see them move forward as a successful team.
I think it's so pivotal that we get Giannis back because this playoffs has been dictated by injuries. That's been the story so far. And obviously he was hurt and he was questionable for game 1. It didn't really look great for his status at all, but he's came back. He looks healthy. And the issue is he looks good and they're still losing. You talked about, the Bucks are still a really good team. They've hung in there with the Suns. They just haven't been able to have that huge stretch to kind of take a lead and take over a game so far.
100%. And I also think, we are in an era of basketball where we are post 1 star wins you a title. We are past that phase of basketball. We are now into you need 2 or 3 stars to win you a title. And unfortunately, we're seeing that with the Bucks. Giannis has shown time and time again just how loyal he is to this Milwaukee Bucks franchise, and that he wants to stay there and he wants to win there. But it seems like if he's going to win there, it might not be this year, as his team is down 0-2 at this point. but he's also going to need another piece of some sort. And we can talk about that come off season. But for now, unfortunately, it's leading to a serious deficit that is not a good look for the Bucks.
Yeah, and that certainly is discouraging because when you look at the Bucks, this probably is their best chance, right? You went through an injury-riddled East. The Nets will, we presume, be back next year. So it's just going to get tougher for them. But one team we do know that did get over the hump for the second straight year is the Tampa Bay Lightning. Quiggs is going to be joining us yet again for some headlines. We're going to talk Lightning and some Olympics updates as we approach the Olympics coming up soon.
Yeah, so much to talk about. Obviously, I'm a big hockey guy myself. Unfortunately, being a New York area hockey fan does not make you a big Tampa Bay Lightning fan, especially growing up and watching every Ranger captain named Ryan retire and then move down to Tampa, just as New Yorkers do in general. But it's a little frustrating to see, quite honestly. But you got to tip your cap to a Tampa Bay Lightning team and franchise that is just so good right now.
Yeah, and so then we have an interview with John Harrington. Speaking of hockey, he's on that 1980 Miracle on Ice team. I know we talked after the interview, and it's one of the favorite things I've ever done for FUV, and I think you feel the same.
Oh my goodness, it was just my eyes were like beaming the whole time. Is eyes beaming a phrase? I don't even know this. Our producer Alex Bowles, is eyes beaming a phrase? Look it up when we're in the break. Oh, he's giving me the thumbs up. All right, cool. So it's a phrase. But anyways, it was a wonderful interview to be a part of. He was so open and just the first thing he said in the interview, which you'll hear later, is, "I love talking about the 1980 Olympics." So I was like, "Oh, this is going to be such a good interview." So we were very excited to do it, and he seemed just as excited as we were.
Yeah, so you'll definitely want to hear that. And then we're going to get in some soccer talk with the Euro finals set tomorrow for 3 p.m. We have England and Italy. Both teams have huge title droughts, and one of them will finally break through tomorrow.
Absolutely. And, these are, as you mentioned, these are two countries that, we think of as near the top of the food chain in soccer. Italy a little more literally than figuratively in terms of food chains. But, with England, they're a team that narrative-wise, I guess, fits pretty well because they've gotten to play all of their matches at home now. Italy's unfortunately going to have to come in and try and be the enemy here. But, this is going to be a very evenly matched final, and it's just going to be very exciting to see.
Yeah, you said this in our pre-production meeting yesterday, so I don't mean to steal from you, but you talked about it's coming home. If you have to hear that one more time, I'd say let's make a rule not to say that phrase the rest of the show. Are you good with that?
I am so good. Yeah, actually, let's if you're listening and you came in to hear us say that phrase, please, we won't miss you. Turn this off. If I hear it or read it in an Instagram comment section one more time, I'm gonna lose it.
Yeah, and then we'll get some All-Star talk. The All-Star break for the MLB is coming up. The Home Run Derby set Monday. That's always a blast. The All-Star game the next day. We'll get into the Field of 8, who we like, and kind of what we're looking for this All-Star weekend in Colorado.
Yeah, I think it's going to be a really exciting weekend. I mean, it goes without saying that this Home Run Derby is basically on schedule to be the most fervent Home Run Derby we've ever seen. Not only is it being in Colorado, where there is no altitude or there is no resistance or whatever it is. Quigley's trying to correct me, and I can't hear him. He's on mute. But the point is, it's just going to be an exciting Home Run Derby anyway, because you've also got stars that we know of, like Pete Alonso and Trey Mancini and guys we love to watch, and then also Shohei Ohtani is going to be there. I feel like the Beatles are coming to the Ed Sullivan Show. I'm like, oh my goodness, Shohei Ohtani is going to be there. I'm going to get to watch him.
And because we all know how special he's been, but playing on the West Coast, we're East Coast guys, we don't get to see him every night. Yeah. And the thing that, not to relate this too much to the slam dunk contest, but one of the criticisms with that is you'll have some no names in there, some role players, but this is a star-studded event for the All-Star break. So we're really looking forward to the Home Run Derby. And then staying on the topic of baseball, we have an interview with Terry Cashman, who's the man behind Talkin Baseball. As you kind of alluded to earlier, it's the 40th anniversary of the song, and it still plays well to this day, Dylan.
It really does play well. And, more than anything, more than the fact that it plays well, the fact that it plays is just something. It's interesting. He mentions a little bit in the interview, just being at a place and hearing his song and watching it cross generations, and just how much that song can mean in terms of the longevity of the sport that kind of spans the entire history of the United States in a way. So it's a wonderful story to think about, and it was great to get to talk to him about it.
Yeah, and then to end the show, we thought, what's a kind of fun little way to do this? Space Jam 2, the new legacy, is coming out on Friday. So we thought we'd end with just a quick kind of some predictions for it, some other athletes we'd like to see in other installments. Should be a fun kind of nice way to wrap up the show today.
Absolutely. I have some very strong thoughts about things. I know who's going to lead in points in the game, in the film. I think you and I have our own opinions of who else could have taken the starring role in Space Jam 2, and it didn't have to be a basketball player.
Yeah, so that'll be a really good talk. We'll have quigs for that as well as a few other segments throughout the show. But we're going to take a quick break here. We're going to come back with some Mets Yankees. You are listening to One on One.
One-on-One has a brand new YouTube channel. Subscribe to WFUV Sports to catch our simulcast Saturday nights and get notifications so you never miss another show. Miss the show? You can find on-demand segments, interviews, and highlights every week. WFUV Sports, home to New York's longest-running sports call-in show and the flagship station of Fordham Athletics.
Ryan Gregoire here as we welcome you back into One-on-One, New York's longest-running sports call-in show. We're going to get into some Mets talk right now, and there's really no better person to talk Mets with than my co-host and Mets beat reporter, Dylan Balsamo, tonight. And so the Mets, a big week for them. They took 2 of 3 versus the Brewers, and I think, we'll start there. We'll get into the 7-game pivotal stretch versus the Pirates coming up. But you take 2 of 3, you hit Brandon Woodruff and Corbin Burns. You win both those games. Those are two All-Stars this year. Those are legit starting pitchers. And we know that for this year for the Mets, the hitting has been the issue. It looks like it's turning around a little bit, Dylan. What have you seen so far?
Absolutely. So, you look at this series with the Brewers and really anything of 2 wins and coming close to 3 wins is such a success considering how good this Brewers team has been, specifically where they placed themselves in their division, but also the last 40 games of their season, they have been basically the best team in baseball over that stretch. So for the Mets to take 2 or 3 from them, it's just a sign of the changing of the guards of the Mets. Because usually this type of time of year in July is a really dog days of summer type series for the Mets, and this would have just been brutal. But that's not the case with this Brewers team. You talk about the offense, and what we've seen is just how explosive they can be. They're not a team to this point, and this is something you're going to have to work on. They're not a team that is good offensively over 9 innings. Few teams are over 9 innings, but the Mets they're very good at scoring in the bottom of the 7th inning. So
7th inning Mets.
It's a very Mets thing to do. But so unfortunately, that's something that's going to have to be worked on. But at this point, it's at least a sign of improvement for a team offensively that has gotten their tools back, have gotten, Brandon Nimmo came back during the Subway Series last week and just completely revamped the way this Mets offense works and the way this team has functioned. So that's all good things for them.
Yeah, the never say die mentality, I think, has been so big. And that game, I think it was the DeGrom start versus the Brewers. You're trailing going to the bottom of the seventh in a 7-inning game. And you're facing the best closer in baseball at that point, Josh Hader. And Jose Peraza, who's becoming kind of a pinch hit legend with the Mets, ties the game with a homer, Hader's first homer allowed all year. And from that point on, you just feel a sense of energy and pride. Like, the Mets are going to come and do this. Like, you feel confidence in their ability to get timely hits. Even in the last inning, Edwin Diaz struggled. They're able to come back. Jeff McNeil, I think, walked it off. And so having that ability, like, it's not the best offense in baseball, right? No one's saying it. But the timely hits is so crucial because the pitching is going to be there. They are going to give you great performances at least 3 out of 5 days a week. So if you're able to string together timely hits, clutch hits, that's all you really need to string together wins. And I think the reason the offense has heated up so recently, there's 2 main reasons when I look at it. It's Brandon Nimmo, as you talked about, his return. He's really been a spark at the top of that lineup, 337, 886 OPS since he's been back. He's been rock solid in center. And Pete Alonso, who he had a rough, short in 2020 coming off his rookie year, 2019. Some were wondering, was it a one-year wonder? Was he a product of the juice balls? And that was certainly a fair criticism. I wondered it because his numbers were down, but he is red hot right now. He has been a huge cog. The power has been huge. He's up to 16 homers on the year. We'll talk about the All-Star or the Home Run Derby later. He'll be competing in it, and he's one of the guys who's coming in hottest. His OPS has got all the way to 820, and so, even 2 weeks ago, we were talking how this Mets lineup had no stars, at least production-wise, no one with OPS above 800. Now suddenly you have 2 guys who are very above-average hitters, and they've been able to kind of right the ship. And so as other guys get going, a Jonathan VR gets clutch hits every now and then. It's just enough for this Mets team to win ball games.
Ryan, something you mentioned about that never say die mentality. What I've noticed about ball clubs, usually around mid-June, is when you figure out your identity as a team. And that kind of carries you through the season. And that could be a whole bunch of different things, whether you're a good team or a bad team. You kind of figure out, the ways you like to win games, the ways you go about things, the character that is your team. The Mets were unfortunately at the disadvantage of so many of their expected starters were out that they weren't able to figure out that identity really until, I would say, last week. So that mentality has come into full fruition for them now, and it feels like they're going to carry that momentum for the continuation of the season, whether they win or lose. That's just the team that they're going to be. And, you talk about the offense. Obviously no one's saying this is the best offensive team in baseball, anywhere close to it. They're still near the bottom of the barrel in batting average. And that's something that I think will continue to improve. But the point is, it's a very knee-jerk reaction to think, the problem is pitching. The problem is hitting. You're a good hitting team. You're not a good pitching team. I think balance is so incredibly underrated. I know it sounds like an obvious thing, but I feel like the Mets at their best are a very well balanced club from start to finish in a 9-inning game. They're able to have that kind of balance that the starting staff has their strengths, the bullpen has their strengths, the offense has their strengths. There's some great defensive players on this team. They have those things that they can rely on, and that balance makes for a good team. Not everything has to be 100%. Anyone who's ever played a sports video game knows you can't get every single thing up to 100%. You have to find the correct balance. But, you also talk about Pete Alonso, hit a home run, a 3-run shot Friday during the 10-run 6th inning that the Mets had. That was just his second home run at Citi Field this year. And I think that's a big part of it. For whatever reason, he struggled at home this year. So as he continues to improve in Queens, the Mets will continue to improve offensively because that's just such a huge juggernaut to have in your lineup when Pete is really hitting.
Yeah, and it brings an interesting question that I wanted to ask you, and it's about the ceiling of this team because you talked about the balance, and there are if this lineup, what we're seeing right now isn't a mirage, there are 0 weaknesses of this team. The bullpen, as you said, is probably the biggest question mark, but they have their guys, Edwin Diaz, Aaron Luke. Those are 2 A guys at least this year. And so with the pitching, being, I think, A++, right up there with any team's rotation in baseball. 3 All-Star caliber guys. You're getting a Carrasco back. Syndergaard might be there. So, like, when you look at it like that, the lineup, what was holding this team back, right? If the lineup was hitting like they are right now, we're in the season, they'd be up 10 games in this division. It's just the reality of it with the slumping that's gone on around the NL East. I think many maybe looked at this team as a product of their division, and yeah, sure, they can get into the playoffs. Maybe they can sneak by in a best of 5 with DeGrom. And I hate to be so reactionary and so look towards the big picture, but you have to wonder, the ceiling of this team could be through the roof if the offense, if Nimmo is the real deal. And if we're going to see performances like we did Friday, where I argued with the other Mets beat reporter, shout out Sam, he thought that game Saturday, the other Saturday night versus the Yankees, was the best offensive performance. I thought it was last night. Certainly runs-wise, it is. If that is a sign of things to come, what is this team's ceiling?
Well, it's interesting. Obviously, you're not going to have an inning where you score 10 runs every night. You're probably not even going to have it more than one more time this season. That doesn't happen, obviously. But what we did see last night was that when one guy's hitting well in this lineup, this is actually something Pete Alonso talked about in the press conference the other night. He was asked about, what he attributes his success to recently, because, he's been hitting so well in the last really 2.5 weeks at this point. What he attributed his success to, and he also pointed out Dom Smith, who's also been hitting really well lately, is that this lineup feeds off of each other. When one guy's hitting well, the whole lineup is going to improve. We've seen that with Brandon Nimmo, because it starts from the top down. As soon as one guy is hitting well, that is just a motivational booster for himself. And Mets are able to carry that momentum offensively. Now, are they going to have to work on where they kickstart that stuff? They're going to have to learn how to jumpstart their own car offensively. And they'll figure that out. Maybe they'll trade for a piece. I know Chris Bryant has been in conversation, become a Met basically for like 2 years now, it feels. Who knows if it's actually going to happen? But the point is, as we keep talking about, this lineup does have some talent. They can assemble a 1-8 in the National League lineup top to bottom that you're like, this offense can really score runs here. So, in terms of the ceiling for this team, and you look at the team in total, you talk about the staff and you talk about the bullpen and Loop and Diaz. And, I don't think Seth Lugo or Trevor May get enough credit either. And this offense and the way they've played defensively as well. The ceiling for them is obviously to run away with the National League East in the next month, I think. And then we'll see if they're battle tested enough during the regular season to go up against a team like the Dodgers or the Padres in the playoffs, because that's going to be tough. But perhaps they're up for the challenge.
Yeah, and this is not a very baseball take for me, because it's just, 1 through 9, you always have guys. But, I feel like Lindor is going to be the mark of how this team performs. You talked about feeding off each other. Grand Slam Friday, we know he struggled this year, right? And, feeding off each other, maybe that's part of the reason they struggled so early. Because when you bring in a guy with the expectations, not even just about the salary, just the expectations of Francisco Lindor is a top 3 going into the year, 3 at worst shortstop, elite defender, and he's going to be this team's best hitter. And he's probably not even been a top 5 hitter for this Mets. It certainly has held them back from, their ceiling so far. You look at the last 30 games, there are metrics that tell you he's turning around, but you're still waiting for that breakout. You're still waiting for that player of the week nominee. You're still waiting for the huge week. And, you try to rationalize it, I feel like, with every big hit he has, because he has had big hits. He has had nice games, but there's something about consistently doing it where it has been missing a little bit. Not to just completely rip him. It's still, we're still halfway through this. You can still turn it around. But, I don't know what you think of that. I feel like it is so Lindor based. They need him to be at his best if that lineup wants to seriously compete, because obviously a Pete and Nimmo, a Dom Smith, those are nice pieces, but Lindor is the household name. He's the guy who you should be able to count on through the whole season to hit, because Nimmo, we know he's had the success. He's had a few down years, whatever. Pete, he's hot right now. He's going to come down to earth at some point. There's going to be, I think, a 3-week stretch where you're going to need Lindor to be your best hitter. And so far, we really have not seen that.
Yeah, it's interesting. I would argue over the last 3 weeks is the best stretch of baseball at the plate in particular he's played, but he hasn't gotten on a streak that has been as long as any of his slumps to this point. And that's really the problem. And, people have been tough on Lindor all year, and they were bound to be just because of how huge his contract was at the beginning of this season. And, this is something I keep saying, but I feel like I'm the only one saying it, so I need to continue saying it, is that a person getting that much money just so quickly in their lives, obviously that's going to have an emotional and mental impact on you. That's just such a life-changing thing to happen. So we got to give Lindor that benefit of the doubt. This is not a team that was supposed to win the World Series this year. Steve Collins said when he bought the team, he said 3 to 5 years. Might it be sooner than that? Yeah, it might be. But you got to give specifically Lindor that benefit of the doubt. That being said, his average is well below where it should be. But last night's a good sign. So that can't be understated. That this second half I think is going to be very good for him. And I think he's waiting for that opportunity to be the best player on this team. Because when Pete's going to have a bad stretch where he strikes out like 80 times in a row, it's going to happen. There's going to be a week where Dom Smith, has some tough appearances at the plate. That's all going to happen. So for Lindor, he's going to have to take that opportunity when he sees it and completely run with it and be the almost captain type player that he seems to exude the energy of on this team. He does seem to really, and from everything we've heard about him, that it's like having a second manager on the field. So that will be a huge opportunity for him come the time. I would suspect that going to happen in the next 2 weeks. So for Lindor, you hope this is the time to do it.
Yeah, I want to do something last thing on the Mets that I don't do very often, and it's give the fans a lot of credit for their patience with Lindor, because I see a lot of parallels to Giancarlo Stanton in his Yankee tenure. And it's crazy because his first Yankee at bat, he goes deep. He hits 2 homers in that first game. And by the 4th game, I was ready to run him out of town. I know a lot of Yankee fans were. The overreactionary state of the Yankees fans is certainly there. And so for Mets fans to keep their composure, keep the confidence in Lindor halfway into a year when he hasn't lived up to it, right? Like you objectively can't say he's lived up to it. I do admire that. But speaking of the Yankees, let's shift over to them, because this week they head out west with a lot on the line, as Aaron Boone said. And so far, so good. They take 2 of 3 from a Mariners club who was ahead of them in the standings going into it. The first 2 games of that series was, the game 1 was the best offensive performance of the year, 12 runs through 4 innings, or 9 runs through 4 innings. It was a lot to like. Luke Voigt started the series 7 for 8. He raised his batting average, I think, going into Tuesday. It was 190, and he was up to 260 by the end of it. So certainly a lot to love if you're the Yankees. Huge series versus the Astros going into it. And listen, we know with the Yankees, there's been a ton of downs this year. We've all killed them. I've certainly killed them. But the reality of the situation is, are they great right now? No. But are they out of this? And that answer is no too, Dylan. They're still sitting in that 3 to 4 game range out of a wild card. And there really is no reason that the Yankees can't turn it around. And I know our producer might laugh here because we talk all the time. He likes to make fun of me for saying the Yankees are back 7 different times and then also canceling the season 2 innings later. But the way that the offense is going right now, I think this is huge, because there's one that's going to motivate you in Houston Astros, especially, the Dismember thing. And I do love it. They're giving away replicas of their 2019 World Series appearance where they didn't even win a World Series, which I think that's a little embarrassing. They didn't even win it that year. If you're going to give out the 17 year, but nonetheless, huge series versus the Astros. They take game 1 4-0. Great pitching performance. Your thoughts on the Yankees so far this week and kind of what we've seen, going forward?
Well, first off, Ryan, on those giveaways, and I'm sure every baseball fan is on the internet saw this in some form or another of giveaways the Astros were doing this weekend. Oh my goodness, that is so funny. I cackled when I saw that. I shouldn't like that as much as I do. The others are really trying to just ignore this whole scandal that they really never got truly punished for. And that's the worst, but it's also really funny. So that out of the way. Talk about the Yankees. Ryan, what a difference a day makes, right? Just you get to see the emotional roller coaster of a person, specifically of a Yankee fan who I don't think is used to this kind of turbulence in a year. They were supposed to be very good. So, you specifically look at the first game of that Mariners series. It was looking pretty glum coming into things for the Yankees. They win that first game. The next morning, you look at the standings. They're a couple games out of the wild card. It's like
it's crazy.
The difference in one good day in the standings, not just a Yankee win, but also a couple other teams losing, you get to see the full picture of things. So, from an outsider perspective, this Yankee team is not far out of it really at all. So, a 2 out of 3 against the Mariners, who are a good team, is great for them. And then also this series against the Astros, last night's win, as I'm sure we're about to talk about, was rather emphatic, even if they left 15 men on base.
No, it was really impressive. And the last thing on the Mariners series, and to talk about the turbulence you talked about, I had, they've done a lot of times this year. They've won the first 2 and they haven't been able to finish it. And so they're 10-18 in the final games of the series. Only the Diamondbacks and Pirates are worse. So that is certainly a concern. Weird, right? You have to close out these series, and they haven't been able to do so. And so going into this, if the Yankees lost last night, like, they were getting swept. That's how this season has gone. I was even going into that game, my notes, my prep for the show were way more negative. And as Brett Gardner got a big hit yesterday, I deleted all of them because what the pitching was able to do yesterday, though, and you talked about leaving all those guys on base, 12 hits, only 4 runs, not the best, but they got timely hits, Brett Gardner and DJ maybe specifically. And it doesn't matter when your pitching is as good as it is. And it was kind of a bullpen day yesterday, but Nestor Cortez has been outstanding. And if the Yankees do really turn around, I think he's the face of the turnaround, because coming in, I think the lowest of lows might have been that game 1 versus the Mets that we talked about on Nosebleeds, where Chapman blows the save, you fall to 500, a chance where the Mets can sweep you fall to under 500. There would have been the talk of the town, would have been the talk of baseball overall. And Nestor Cortez is able to be a stopper there. He gives you, 3+ innings of great baseball. The offense does just enough. And he was even better versus an Astros lineup, which was the best in baseball, average, OPS, on base. You look at it, they were top 3 in every category. And so he gives you 4 2/3 shutout innings. And with the story of this Yankees team, the bullpen has been there all year. It really has. Yes, there have been some flare-ups, and that's particularly Chapman. But they are able to keep you in games. And the Chad Green, Jonathan Loizaga combo, both, I think, I don't know if they're necessarily all-star snubs just without looking at it in front of me, but these two had great cases. I think they're number 1 and 2 in pitching WAR for relievers in the AL. And so I love the move, one, to not go to Chapman here. I've been calling for let him earn this role back. And since that meltdown versus the Mets, we did see him versus the Mariners in that 12-1 game. He looked shaky, bases loaded, got out of it, whatever. He's still finding himself. And so there's no reason to give him the closer role back or set a designated closer until then. I like how they're kind of going with the hot hand. But, yeah, big win versus the Astros. You have to continue with that, because if you do lose 2 out of 3, it looks just as negative. So I love the move to go out of the closer role and to kind of go with the hot hand, as I just said. I'm wondering what your thoughts are, because I'm coming to a take here, Dylan, just to wrap up, where I think overall abolish the closer role. Like, that's a take of mine. Even if Chapman gets back to 100%, go with the hot hand. I don't see why not.
I was literally just about to finish with that myself. But, first to say a thing about Nestor Cortez is, he is proof that a starting pitcher does not need to go 7-8 innings in order to make a real difference on your team. Mm-hmm. You talk about him being the face of the turnaround. He really is kind of just he's a guy who can hold things. He's a very bullpen era starter, and that can be a good thing for a team. So Cortez, I thought it was a very impressive start, even if he got a no decision in a 4-0 win for the Yankees against Houston on Friday. But, this bullpen is really good at holding things down. We haven't gotten to see it as much this year because the Yankees have not had a ton of opportunities to just hold things down over an extended period of innings. But they're a good bullpen. My goodness, I didn't even realize. Like, I hadn't given it too much thought. In terms of Chapman, I see no reason why a team needs to have a specific closer, unless you have a guy who is just so lights out, shut down in the 9th inning, like Josh Hader for the Brewers, or what Edwin Diaz has been for the Mets. or what Mariano Rivera obviously was for such a long time for the Yankees himself. I think the post Mariano Rivera Yankees feel the need to have a closer because they think it's just some kind of established thing you need to keep up. But you don't need to do that, especially when your bullpen is as good shutting things down late in the game as they prove that they can be. So, I see no reason to give it back to Chapman either. If he is eventually able to turn things around and be lights out after a certain period of time, I don't think this Astros series is the right place to bring him back into things. Like, I just feel like this is going to be a disaster for him. But, next week against the Red Sox, give him some opportunities. And if he earns it back, he earns it back. That's great. But there are enough arms in this bullpen, and there's enough, good matchup managing that can be done to not even particularly need a guy who comes in the ninth inning every time.
Yeah, it's funny because we talked about maybe that Red Sox series the first time back. I want it to be the All-Star game. I think that's the perfect low leverage situation to get him right. So funny because it's the All-Star game, but that's the only, close game I want to see Chapman right now. One that doesn't impact the Yankees at all. And if we're being completely fair, if you came to me and said, let's abolish the closer rule in the middle of May, I would have said, get the hell out of here, because Chapman was that shutdown closer you just talked about, that Josh Hader is. But I think I do really believe that there is no need to have a closer role. And I get the Mariano Rivera thing. And the Yankees have been blessed post Mariano Rivera to never have a bad bullpen. Even in the years they were bad, you had Rafael Soriano, David Robertson, Del Matanzas, 4-time All-Star. They have been really spoiled with never having a bullpen that's killed them. In my lifetime, I've never had that agony, that pain of a long stretch where the bullpen blows games. And so I think that goes into a deeper thing. And this is particularly important with the Yankees and how they're trying to shed money is don't pay for relievers. Don't spend more than $8 to $10 million on the open market for a reliever. I think they have $30 million tied up in Aroldis Chapman and Zach Britton. There's no need to do that. When you can develop a Chad Green, a Jonathan Loaiza, when you can find a Lucas Luque thin air out of baseball for 5 years, you're able to find him. He got big outs yesterday. He's been big all season. When you're shooting payroll, when you're trying to get onto the luxury tax, I think that he's really need to look to, because we talk about how they can improve and with what assets, because the money is such a big issue. It's don't pay relievers, because to the Yankees' credit, are they the best developing starters? No. Have they brought up a lot of young talent the last 2 years? No. But the bullpen is the one thing they always ace. They are always able to find relievers who can ball. And so when you're able to do that to your success, why pay 30 plus million for that luxury?
Absolutely. And just because I know we got to wrap up here real quick, I'll just make this point because based on what I was saying, and I feel like it doesn't get said enough, the post Mariano Rivera Yankees, but also the post Derek Jeter Yankees, it's been a real adjustment we've seen over the last 5, 6, 7, 8 years to watch a team that had such stable institutions at those specific positions so long, try and figure things out and come to an understanding that it's not going to be as stable for them as it was with Derek Jeter and as it was for Mariano. So that's something the Yankees have had to deal with. And, I feel like the Chapman situation is just an example of that. And that's a little off topic, but I feel like people don't say that enough. And I just wanted to get that off my chest.
Yeah. So a generally positive Yankees segment today, but by the time Monday wraps around, we'll see on nosebleeds or whatever. It could be a complete 180 if things do go badly for the Yankees. I think that'll wrap up our baseball talk for now. But stick around. We're going to bring in Thomas Quigley. We're going to talk some NBA Finals. Suns up 2-0. And you guys are listening to 1-on-1 on 90.7 FM.
sure to follow WFUV Sports on all of our social media platforms. At WFUV Sports on Twitter, at WFUV_sports on Instagram, and WFUV Sports on Facebook and YouTube. WFUV Sports, home to New York's longest-running sports call-in show and the flagship station of Fordham Athletics.
We're back here on One-on-One. We are joined by Thomas Quigley. We're going to get more into the NBA Finals. The Suns took care of business in Phoenix. And so, guys, just before we get into these games, I want to make a point to say that it's really good for the league that we get a healthy Giannis because, as we talked about a little bit in the intro, you know, injuries have been such a big thing in the playoffs. And I think it would have left a stale taste in my mouth if Giannis was not healthy for these playoffs. And I think it's good for everyone, even the Suns, if they're able to win with healthy Giannis, because people love to discredit rings nowadays, as we know. And so having the Bucks at full-ish strength, I think, is just a really good positive for the league as these finals keep getting underway.
Well, absolutely. For one thing, you mentioned discrediting rings, and what's good for the league is that no matter what the championship status of a team that Giannis is on is, you know, whether he wins or not, people are going to tune in to watch Giannis play. Right. He's that good. He's that electric of a player, even if he's not winning championships. So that's a positive.
Yeah, I mean, personally, I think Giannis looked really good in Game 2. He played for
real hot take there, quickly.
Yeah, I know. It's very, very hot take. I know I'm coming in hot with these crazy ideas, but 42 points, 12 boards. It definitely it's fantastic for the casual viewer, for someone who has no stake in these finals whatsoever, to see that at least the Suns won't be taking a championship away from a Bucks team without their legendary star, their two-time MVP. So, no, it's great to see that Giannis is back, but the Bucks are in so much trouble right now. They need to win these two games, obviously, because if they don't, they give the Suns two different opportunities to close it out at home, and based on this performance that these two performances that they had on the road, the Bucks so far, I don't like their chances if they're down 3-1. So, you know, obviously Giannis can't carry this team to a championship by himself, so he needs Middleton and Holiday to show up. And they've been wildly inconsistent all playoffs, despite the praise that, you know, they received throughout the season, throughout their careers. But Holiday, you know, they brought him in because they needed that third star because, you know, Bledsoe is just not your third guy. That's why you trade him for a better player, and he's been really inconsistent, at least on the offensive side. Yeah. So that's a must for the Bucks. And they also need, I think, a strong performance for Brook Lopez would go a long way, especially after, you know, I was at Game 7 of the Nets-Bucks series, and he had 19 points and 8 boards in that Game 7. Obviously, with that KD shot at the end, they're an inch away from being eliminated. But if it weren't for Lopez going off in that game, you know, they might not be in this situation. So, you know, when he can be a bully down low in the paint and then also turn around and hit a 3 in transition, that can be extremely frustrating for a defense. So, you know, I'll look for Brook Lopez to be maybe the cornerstone, and not necessarily the most important player on the floor, but one that can show whether this team has what it takes to win these 2 games at home, send back to Phoenix with a tie score and basically a best of 3 series.
Yeah, I'm going to go into praising the Suns in a second, but I just want to make another point on the Bucks. And so you talked about if they split these games at home, the series is 100% over. You're not winning 2 in Phoenix. You're just not. So you have to win these 2 if you even want to pretend you have a chance in this series. And so the only good news for the Bucks is that Giannis looks healthy. You talked about the 42-12, really an all-time performance from him. But you talked about Jrue Holiday. He went 7 for 21 in Game 2. You traded Eric Bledsoe and the million first-round picks for Jrue Holiday, and he's gave you the exact same shooting splits, like 25% from 3, 41% from the field. So defense has been his bread and butter, but he's given you nothing more offensively. And Chris Middleton, who many look to take the next step, he's a fringe all-star. He's made a few all-star games. He's had some legendary performances in these playoffs, a 20-point game versus the Hawks. He had, I think, that Game 6 versus the Nets. He was all-time as well. But he's shown time and time again he's not consistent, and I think that's what really hurts these Bucks. You don't have another consistent player after Giannis. He went 5 for 16 with 11 points in Game 2. You can't do that against these Suns, as we're going to go about now, because the Suns are a complete basketball team. They're not a CP3, Devin Booker carry show. They are 7-5 deep. This is, they showed how great, like how much of a basketball team they are and not just guys, when I think they had like a 10-pass sequence in that Game 2 versus the Bucks. And I think if they do end up winning this series, that's going in the championship DVD. It was beautiful basketball, and it shows exactly what Suns basketball is all about. And to give them credit, they didn't have much experience going in, and I think that was what made this final series so fascinating, because none of these players in these finals have been here before besides Jay Crowder, who really is just a role player. So you couldn't look at it as one guy being, that was head and shoulders above the rest. Obviously, Giannis is the best player in this finals, but CP3, he hasn't been in the finals, but he has a season worth of games in the playoffs. It's Devin Booker's first playoffs, and they're showing no signs of it. It looks like they have been here forever. Devin Booker looks like he's the 37-year-old in his 16th year who's been in all the big games, and he's not. And so I think that's when you look at it from the Suns' perspective. It's their series to lose, and I'd really be shocked if they did so.
Well, to finish up with points about Milwaukee here is that, if the Bucks' only goal for the next 5-6 years is just to continue selling tickets and selling out their arena, they're going to be fine, because Giannis will continue to play as he will, and he wants to stay in Milwaukee. So you will continue to sell tickets to people wanting to see Giannis play. If you want to win a championship, it's going to take more than this. We have learned. Giannis is good enough of a player, and man, have we learned that he's good enough a player to get you to a final. But he can't get you the whole way. It's something I mentioned during the Open with you, Ryan, which is, there was a certain era of basketball where one star could bring you the whole way. But we're past that. You need 2, maybe 3, as I was talking about. And I hate to sound like a Hollywood agent here, but Middleton and Jrue Holiday, they're good, but they're not stars. You know what I'm saying? So if you're the Bucks, you got to go out and get some. You have to invest in your star by bringing him a friend. It's like having a penguin at the zoo. You got to get another penguin for the zoo, and then you have 2 friend penguins. It was the weirdest analogy I've ever made on this show, but I
logical principles of
of zoology. That's what zoology is, right? So, but to talk about the Suns here, the Suns have proven just through these first 2 games alone just how deep of a team they are. And what's really interesting about it is how quietly they assembled this squad. I don't think they were not a headline team for most any of this season at all. Really not even through the first round of the playoffs. But, you look at guys like Booker and CP3, and they're proof that you do not need finals experience in order to make things click in the final. They may not have been in the final before, but they are battle tested. And that's such an important thing for a squad, especially that is trying to make things work for a guy like Chris Paul, who, is not as electric as perhaps he was at one point in his career. And that just comes with age, and that's fine. But he does still have that talent. And Thomas, I'm sure you agree with me on that.
Well, I mean, you mentioned the just the inexperience that the Suns have in the finals. They don't have any experience in the playoffs. This entire franchise has been just robbed of the playoff experience for 11 years. I kind of want to ask you guys about what this meteoric rise that they had from going 8-0 in the bubble last year, following, another rather mediocre season, despite, Devin Booker putting up numbers throughout the season. What do you think the legacy of this Suns team? I know it's early. We're only 2 games into the finals, but just by them getting to this finals in their first playoff run in 11 years, what do you think the legacy of this team has been, just in the way that they've just been able to completely turn things around? Is that, credit to Chris Paul? Is it Monty Williams? Is it the growth of Devin Booker himself, or is it a mixture of the three? What do you guys think? This
is the ultimate legacy season for Chris Paul. And, Monty Williams deserves 150% of the credit. There was a video yesterday of him comforting his players and stuff. He is an awesome coach. He is a legit coach. And so it's nothing to take away from him. But Chris Paul turning around this was an awful franchise. This was not even like LeBron goes to the Lakers. That's not a bad franchise. It's just not. And Chris Paul takes over a team. They did go 8-0 in the bubble, but that doesn't really mean much. And I don't think anyone was taking that to heart, because obviously a million different things happened in the bubble. TJ Warren was prime Kobe. Like there's a ton of stuff. And to put myself accountable, I was not all in on the Suns. I wasn't. I think I said before the year, they're an 8-9 seed. This Chris Paul move was a lateral move, and it wouldn't do anything to expedite the process. Devin Booker would want out. Things were looking bad for the Suns. People were coming up with Devin Booker trade packages just a year ago. Just a year ago, Devin Booker was, the NBA Twitter, the NBA Instagram trade package guy. And so for Chris Paul to go there and to unlock another level in Devin Booker's game, and the way that they play together, it speaks to Chris Paul. And he really has. Everywhere he's gone, they've won, right? He goes to Houston, they fall 1 game short to a Warriors team that had a dynasty. And that's because Chris Paul got hurt. He's been the one that's been injured. He's been the one that the brutal breaks have gone against him so far throughout his career. And this year, it is the perfect 180. It's year 16, and it's never too late to count someone out, because I think when Chris Paul was in Oklahoma City last year with 3 years left on a huge contract, I don't think anyone was saying this guy's going to win a ring. He took over that rebuilding Thunder team, brought them to the playoffs. But for what Chris Paul did in Phoenix, it cements himself as like an NBA superstar, an NBA all-time great. We don't have to get into the debate, where is he all-time right now? I don't think it's the time for that. I think it's time to just appreciate what he has done and what the Phoenix Suns have done with an all-time turnaround from missing the playoffs to being 2 wins away from an NBA Finals. They've never led in the NBA Finals also. They've been in 2 other times. They fell down 0-2 in those series. So, they're closing in on history here in Phoenix, and you just have to feel great for them.
Thomas, it's an excellent question, trying to figure out what that thing is, if it's one particular thing, because it doesn't really feel like it's one particular thing. At least to me, it feels like a combination of a whole bunch of different things. Most of them we've mentioned. The coaching here is outstanding. Devin Booker has come into his own fully. Maybe that's has something to do with Paul. I bet it does. But that's just the reality of things. Of course, Chris Paul is a part of it. Perhaps also the return of Cliff Paul commercials has something to do with things here. I think so, personally. I think he plays better when he's also playing Cliff Paul. When you do what you love, you just play better. It's like take the girl who just won the spelling bee. But we could talk more about that later. But I also think something that is not mentioned enough is, we talk about going 8-0 in the bubble in COVID. And, did that really mean anything? No, not really. But I think that's a momentum factor for a franchise. It absolutely is. I think it's something that pushes through. It's some kind of post-COVID clarity, almost, if you will, of living life different on the other side of quarantine, perhaps you could say, about this Phoenix Suns team. But really being an 8-0 team, in the bubble, I think had a real effect on them. And I think it's also worth mentioning that this league seems slightly different in the post-COVID era, just slightly different. I can't figure out what it is, but it has seemed to benefit Phoenix in some way.
I will say two things. One, I think that 8-0 run, and I might be wrong about this because obviously I'm not anywhere near the Phoenix locker room or anywhere near the general side of the continent. But the 8-0 run to go to the bubble, be invited to the bubble because you have a chance to make the playoffs, win all 8 of your games, and be told by the NBA, all right, now you have to go home. Sorry that we invited you here just for you to win all of your games, and then we send you home because you're still not good enough. I think that probably left a sour taste in the mouths of most of those Suns, excluding the newbies this year in Chris Paul and Jay Crowder and a few others. But I think that might have something to do with it. And I also think what you said, Gregoire, about Chris Paul has just completely changed everything about this franchise. It's hard to quantify how much he means to a team, especially just like even last year. He was traded to a hapless OKC team, just full of 20-year-olds, the youngest team in the league this year at least. And the second he leaves, they're 14th in the West with the 22-50 record. Last year, he brought that team to a Game 7 against the Houston Rockets team with James Harden and Russell Westbrook. There's just something that he brings to any team, especially a young team. I mean, we've seen it back-to-back years. The leadership he brings to a team, the ability to organize the offense, it's just been an incredible thing to watch for these past 2 years, especially this year in this playoff run. I think that, obviously Monty Williams is a terrific coach, and Devin Booker is an all-star. He's already an all-star. He's a superstar in the making. DeAndre Ayton is another future all-star, certainly, who's coming into his own. But I got to say that the majority of I think just Chris Paul might be the reason above all else that this Phoenix Suns team is just 2 wins away from their first franchise championship. And I think that it's going to do so much for his legacy to where, even last year it was like, this guy's never going to win a ring. He's a terrific player, but he just never had that killer mentality that got him to a championship. And he's completely flipped the script on it this year. And, we'll see what happens, but it's looking good for him right now.
Yeah, Dylan posed a really interesting question, which I'm going to try to answer about what is different with this post-COVID NBA. But first, I think we can't go this full Suns segment without bringing up DeAndre Ayton, how special he's been. He's a walking double-double. He just had his worst game of the playoffs in that game too, and he still shot 40% and had a double-double. I mean, what he's been able to do, I think before this game, his lowest percentage from the field was 55%. He's a rebound machine. And so when you have that out low, and then you have a 3-and-D guy like Mikal Bridges on the wing who gave you 27 in game 2, there's just too many moving parts for a one-guy show in Giannis right now who, by the way, I think you guys were a little too hard on Giannis, just a side thing. He did everything he could in game 2. I don't think it's necessarily he can't be the best guy on a championship team. I think it's just he can't be the best guy on this team to win a championship because they don't have the pieces around him. But to answer the question about, what is different, I think there's an interesting argument that the Suns were the biggest beneficiaries of the bubble because obviously the teams that didn't go got the extra rest. That was nice. We saw it with the Hawks. We saw it with the Knicks. But the Suns got still 2 months of rest because they didn't make the playoffs. But they got those 8 games to come together as a team to realize they have something special in Phoenix. Does Devin Booker request out if they don't go 8-0 in that bubble, if he doesn't think they could turn it around? Because it certainly looked like that. They were the last team to get the invite, as Quiggs brought up. They were a gloomy franchise, not much hope. And that kind of changed the energy. That kind of, did that make their push to get Chris Paul? Because maybe the front office looks at it and says, okay, maybe we can make a run with this team. We just went 8-0. Let's bring in a guy who makes every team he's a part of better. They did that, and obviously, they had the benefit of not playing deep into the bubble like the Lakers, the Nuggets, the Heat, some of the teams that did get banged up in these playoffs that the Suns were lucky enough to play not at full strength. So I think that's a really interesting argument. As more years come down the line, I think we'll get another shorter offseason this year. But then going forward, once we get back into the normal swing of things, it's so fascinating to see what this post-COVID NBA will look like, because I do think it changed the landscape of the league forever. I think the bubble is something that one day, we're going to have a documentary about. I think they're already starting a documentary actually about it. It's just such a unique case study because none of the other sports, I guess hockey did do it. They had two different bubbles. But the thing that's fascinating about the NBA is the stars talk, and they talk about where they're going to play. We'll get into Olympics next segment, but there was a quote earlier, and I forget who it was, but they asked him, do you think the guys will be talking about teaming up? Like, do you think that'll be a talk for Olympics? And someone was like, duh. Like, obviously, we're going to talk about it. So I think that's interesting to keep in mind. But we're going to take another quick break here, as Quigs will be with us yet again for some more headlines. Stick around for more one-on-one on 90.7 FM.
Be sure to check out all of our latest podcasts on WFUVSports.org or wherever you get your shows, including NFL Friday, Nosebleeds, Pick and Pod, 5 on 3, College Gridiron, and FUV FC. Also, our newest edition, Off the Air, diving into the station's legacy with its most prominent alumni. WFUV Sports, home to New York's longest-running sports call-in show and the flagship station of Fordham Athletics. It's WFUV and WFUV HD, New York. Listener-supported public media from Fordham, the Jesuit University of New York. Right here on 90.7 FM, WFUV.org, and WFUVSports.org. This is One-on-One, New York's longest-running sports call-in show on 90.7 FM, WFUV.org, and WFUVSports.org.
All right, gentlemen, let's dive into this weekend's headlines. First up, Wednesday night, the Tampa Bay Lightning beat the Montreal Canadiens 1-0 to clinch their second straight Stanley Cup in 5 games in front of their home crowd. Of course, this run has led to debates over whether Tampa's team ranks among the dynasties of sport. What are your guys' takes on that matter?
Yeah, I think it's an interesting conversation because I don't think 2 championships can make you a dynasty. I think you need prolonged success, maybe like 3 to 5 years. That would be my measure. But there is no one way to quantify it. And I think it's really interesting because, they ran it back after their bubble year and their championship. And so we know the salary cap, they manipulated it, whatever. My take on that is just it's in the rules. So, it's best to use it to your advantage. If you're able to have a guy out all year, bring him back in the playoffs, I think that's a huge weapon. But their head coach, we know they're up against the cap, first of all. They're going to lose some key guys in the expansion draft with the Seattle Kraken. Their head coach, John Cooper, said after they won, I think this was shocking. He said that this might have been their last stand. I've never heard a head coach right after they won, say, yeah, this was probably it for us. And so I do think, it's really interesting. Obviously, the Lightning, what they were able to do, kind of a really sneaky redemption story after 2 years ago. They get swept in the first round as a huge favorite to win it all. And people questioned if they'd ever be able to come back. They're able to do so 2 straight years. It's good for them. Tampa is suddenly out of nowhere becoming a championship dynasty. I know one guy for the Bucks is getting credit for that. I'm not going to mention his name. But, so I don't know about particular dynasty yet, but we'll see what they can do to keep this team kind of intact going forward.
Greg, you're right. Cooper was all like, this will be Phil's last year as the head coach of the Bulls. That was the kind of the mentality I got from it. It was very last dance-ish. But here's the thing about dynasties, and this is just not much a hockey point. This is just a regular point about dynasties. But the thing is, especially this Lightning team, comparatively is going to get tossed around with the Montreal Canadiens of the 70s, certainly some Devils teams from the early 2000s as dynasties, if you will. And the main argument against them, I guess, is that the longevity is not as long because it's only 2 championships at this point. But here's the thing. The way sports works, at least at the moment, and I would guess is going to work for the rest of time, you're never going to win 5 championships in a row. It's not going to happen. You're never going to have the same team 5 years in a row. It's never going to happen again. So I think we need to reevaluate what we think of as a dynasty. The Golden State Warriors are, I guess, the really only exception to this rule for about half a decade and won continuously for about half a decade. So that's an exception. But this Tampa Bay Lightning team, I see no reason why we can't call them a dynasty. They dominated hockey not only for these past 2 years, but they've been one of the best teams in hockey really since 2015. So why are we not thinking of dynasty? To me, we can't compare different eras that are so different in the way. For me, this Lightning team is totally a dynasty.
Yeah, I'm gonna go through and just track what they've done since 2015. Obviously, in 2015, since 2015, they've had the same core pretty much more or less with Stamkos, Kucherov, Palat, Vasilevsky, Hedman, Tyler Johnson, and the past one, they've lost in 2 conference finals. 2015 was the beginning of this. They lost to Patrick Kane and the Blackhawks, right? All superstar and his dynastic team. Yeah. And then they lost an Eastern Conference in 2016 to Sidney Crosby and his dynastic Penguins that won back-to-back, also won one in 2009. And then in 2018, they lost the Eastern Conference Finals to the eventual champion, Alex Ovechkin, winning his first title with the Capitals. And, of course, you mentioned their low point in 2019, getting swept first round by an 8-seed Columbus. Since then, they've won 8 straight playoff series and 2 Stanley Cups. You know what this reminds me of? And I might be getting a little ahead of myself here, but it reminds me a little bit of the early stages of the Bulls dynasty. Now, hear me out. This is obviously the 90s, a different sport. But back in the 80s, Jordan his squad could not get past the Celtics and Larry Bird in the mid-80s with their 84-86 championship teams. And then they couldn't get past the Eastern Conference Finals against those bad boys Pistons teams of 89 and 90. Before they finally achieved their glory and their multiple three-peats in the 90s. So once they overcame those early hurdles, it was championship after championship. And that's so far what we've seen from Tampa, after exercising their demons of losing in the Stanley Cup Finals, losing in a few conference finals, and getting absolutely embarrassed by an 8-seed Columbus Blue Jackets team. I'm not saying that the Lightning are going to win 4 of the next 6 cups, but this roster has persevered to this point, and the throne is currently theirs to lose. Now, despite maybe what their coach is saying is, and he obviously knows more about the team and their future than we do. So, there's a good chance in this modern age of sports, this team can't continue to people on the roster must be at least the same caliber of team that they've been. But it's a good start for a dynasty. I'm going to go out on a limb and say that this is a dynasty because of the way that hockey has been over the past 20 years. You haven't really seen, other than the Blackhawks, win more, or any team win 3 or more championships in such a short span of time. So I go out and say that the Penguins, who won in 2016 and 2017, they were a dynasty. Back-to-back champions. It's just so hard to win a championship back-to-back in the modern age of sports. Hockey is and basketball are the two sports that really have been the only ones where you've seen that type of thing. It hasn't happened in the NFL since the Patriots back in 03 and 04. I'm pretty sure 2000 run. It's definitely something that you don't see very often, and it should be recognized by calling them a dynasty, because that is
here's my question with the Bulls comparison, because after the Bulls won 2 straight, I think everyone could make the case that the trajectory was still going up. Is with the Lightning right now, is it still that linear, is it kind of plateau, and you hope that it can stay there? And I think in the modern era, Dylan made a great point how we have to reevaluate what we look in a dynasty. And I think the way to keep winning and keep teams intact, because you're not going to be able to sign all your superstars, you're not going to be able to maintain all that. It's you need guys ring chasing, and you don't see it a lot with hockey, but you see it with the other major sports. We just saw with the Bucks, where you sign vets for cheap deals who are looking. They're at the end of their careers. They're looking to win, but they have experience. They're still really good at their sport and all that. So I think that's a way where you can maintain it. You can withstand some of the losses, because this Lightning team is at least more. This team right now is not going to be just because of the cap situation, the expansion draft. The expansion draft in hockey, I think this is off topic, but it's so fascinating because it can literally, you've so many. The ring chasing thing is, I think, what can keep you there. A 2 is just really tough for me to see as a dynasty. I get we do have to reevaluate it in today's age, because we haven't seen it. We don't see back-to-back titles in the MLB anymore. We don't see it in the NFL. So I understand that point. It is interesting too, because it's not like they're just coming up, right? They've failed and failed. So it is interesting. I'll lean no dynasty, but I'm certainly open to the idea if the success kind of continues.
Well, you know what I think is really interesting, guys, is we talk about ring chasing, and that happens much more in the NBA than it does in every other sport. And I think the reason for that is because of the nature of the sport, where you really have 5 guys on the court at a time, and one guy can change the way your season goes so much. To such like we just talked about Giannis for 20 minutes. But it's that exact same thing. If there's any sport where a team can stay assembled for an extended period of time, I guess it's really hockey, right? Now, obviously, it's not going to happen in basketball. Baseball has way too many moving parts. Football has way, way, way too many moving parts. That's why we haven't seen a back-to-back Super Bowls, right, since 04, Thomas, right?
3-04, yeah.
Yeah. I mean, the Patriots were good for an extended period of time there, and that's obviously a dynasty, but there you go. But with hockey, at least the way it works, you can keep a core for a very extended period of time and continue to move with it and bring in pieces as you need to. So I think if there's any sport that can continue to have dynasties, it's hockey. If there's any sport where I think the current reigning champion can be the champion for the next 2 or 3 years, I actually do think it's the Tampa Bay Lightning in hockey. That's just the way things are. Now, with the expansion draft, Ryan brings up an interesting point that I hadn't actually thought too much about. With the Golden Knights, we saw things work right away because they knew how to take things nicely. But I think the best way to do that is not to take from any singular team, because you can also keep players from the expansion draft, so that'll be fine. But they were able to recruit really well and build a real base right there. So I don't think the Lightning are going to be too affected by the expansion draft as much as I'm sure Seattle's going to assemble a good squad because that's just the way you do things now in the expansion draft, and good for that. I don't like seeing expansion teams bad for so long. But I kind of do have faith, no matter what any head coach says, that I think this Lightning team can be just fine for at least another 3 years, I think. Right, Thomas?
I got to say that you are completely right when you say that hockey is the sport where you can keep, a core together for longer than any other sport. I think that probably has a lot to do with the fact that the contracts are just not nearly as lofty as they are in any of the other three sports. They're all, everybody's getting big paydays. The MLB, especially now in the NBA with Supermax contracts, and in the NFL with, largely guaranteed money centric contracts. Whereas in the NHL, it's still growing in America. It's much bigger in Canada, and you're not necessarily getting as much viewership or as much money for the players. So it's a lot more of a team oriented thing. I think winning the Stanley Cup is probably the most iconic trophy there is in American sports, or just North American sports, I should say. Yeah. So I think a lot more players in the NHL prioritize just winning and building a team over, say, getting a payday or going to a better location. Maybe like someone would rather sign with their team in a small market than go off to, say, LA or New York just to live there, which happens a lot in, the NBA and the NFL. So, yeah, I'd have to agree with you there. So if there is any team that could continue a run into a certifiable dynasty that no one disagrees with, it's got to be a hockey team, and in this case, the Tampa Bay Lightning. But now let's transition to some unfortunate news out of Tokyo. So Olympic organizers announced Thursday that fans will be barred from attending all events at the Tokyo Game in 2 weeks. This is in response to Japan declaring a state of emergency due to the country's increased COVID-19 infection rates. Despite the unfortunate development, though, the U.S. men's basketball team continues to prep for the games with an exhibition against Nigeria on Saturday. Do you guys think that Team USA will win their 4th straight gold medals in Tokyo? And what effect do you think the empty stadiums will have on the basketball tournament and the entire Olympic Games as a whole?
Yeah, I'll go first. Obviously, they're obviously going to win. It's not even the talent discrepancy between the men's basketball team and even the women's basketball team compared to these other countries. It's really unfair, the amount of talent that the United States has. That's why one of the reasons I love the Olympics so much is because I get to just root for a super team. The Nets out here who built their team, ever. It's about the country and stuff like that. So I'm certainly looking forward to Team USA coming together, especially after last year. I love the Olympics. I don't know about you guys. I'm really looking forward to this one, first one really as an adult, I guess I'd say. The one interesting thing I'll say about that is if you're a Suns or Bucks fan, this is the one are you a little worried because Booker, Middleton, Holiday, and even Giannis for Greece right now, they all have guys filling in for them, but once that season's over, they're playing right away. So this break that guys didn't really get with the bubble and all that stuff, they're going to be experiencing it. I'd be at least a little worried about Devin Booker. I don't know if I'm a Suns fan. I love the idea of them playing. Obviously, from a USA standpoint, I love it. And I'm a Knicks fan, and Julius Randle not being in it, he kind of was robbed, right? He's clearly better than Kevin Love is at basketball right now. But it's not something I was losing sleep over because, okay, now he just gets to work in the gym, grind, get his shot better, and hopefully not collapse in the playoffs this year. So, from that aspect, I think that's interesting. And the fans thing, it certainly is a bummer. The state of emergency, I saw they announced that. I think that was before they announced no fans. So that was I was worried that the Olympics would get canceled. And I think when you look back at just the last year, we have to take the victories no matter what, because it has really been tough on everyone. Not to make this show gloomy, but just to get the Olympics back in whatever form it does. Obviously, the atmosphere won't be there, but getting to watch it will be special. And we've endured a lot. We've saw every sport without fans, so I think we're a little conditioned to it now, which is a sad thing to say. But I think we can handle it. It's not the end of the world. And so I'm trying to take a more positive approach where it is unfortunate that I don't know what their vaccine rollout or any of their, specific stuff is there. But I'm just glad that the Olympics will go on as scheduled. Like, really, that's my end of the way takeaway of this.
Okay, look, to answer your first question, to answer your second question, I think they're all. I think I'm going to emphasize my first answer, considering the fact that most of these players playing for Team USA just spent so much time playing in empty stadiums that they know exactly how to do it. Say hi to my dad in the background, by the way. Love boys. You're actually. This is actually for all of America. This is not just. This is not just. Good morning. Wow. Okay. I told him I was doing a show, but he still comes down anyway. It was the point is, most of these players just spent basically an entire year's worth of time playing in empty stadiums. That's really going to benefit them. So, to answer your second question, what I want to emphasize is, Gregor talked about loving seeing the super team in the Olympics, and here's the thing: I've read everything there is to read about the '92 Dream Team. I love the '92 Dream Team. I'm starting to have a problem with the disparity when pros get to play in the Olympics. I think specifically in basketball, which is such an American-centric sport, it's a real problem. And it really it concerns me. I think like it makes watching Team USA really fun, but it makes watching the rest of the tournament not so fun. And I feel quite bad for the other countries. And down he comes again.
Sorry,
it's more than okay. So, anyways, wow, this is really entertaining radio and television, isn't it? But anyways, it starts to concern me about the nature of the rest of the tournament. So I'm not sure how I feel about that, even though that's kind of off topic. But Ryan also mentioned owners not being totally on board with their players having to play longer. And to be honest, that really bothers me because that's such an American businessman capital greed type mentality where it's like, I don't want my players playing in this thing that the whole world plays in because they play for my get over yourself. And those are all off topic things, but those really bother me. So, Thomas, I'm curious as to your thoughts on all of this.
No, they're probably not even going to get out of group stage. So, no, obviously. Well, I mean, okay, to play devil's advocate, the 2019 FIBA World Cup, they did lose to France in the quarterfinals. Now, that was a completely different team because no one really cares about the FIBA World Cup. You care a lot more about the Olympics. So this team is absolutely stacked. You got arguably the best player in the world, young guns, and in Devin Booker, Jason Tatum, Bradley Beal, just guys who are very good at scoring. And you're right. The NBA players from America there happen to be more of them, and there happen to be better than all of the other players from the other parts of the world. So yes, of course, the United States is going to have a huge advantage every time they play in the Olympics. But I will say that with the emergence of international superstars like Giannis, like Luka Doncic, Rudy Gobert, these guys are coming. There's definitely an increase of superb talent coming from international or just countries outside of the U.S. So I think that while this is still seen like every time that the Olympics roll around and there's a basketball tournament, it seems like it's all right, who's competing for second place. I think as we go along, we'll start to see maybe a little bit more of a competitive atmosphere because of the way that the game is growing overseas. So there's part of me that thinks, all right, every time the Olympics roll around, it's like, all right, why does this sport even in the Olympics? Obviously, it's played everywhere, but it's just such a disparity in talent. And I don't like the idea of professionals from playing in the Olympics just because obviously there's fantastic stories of, even in like hockey, back when pros couldn't play, if pros could play in 1980, you don't get the Miracle on Ice. You don't get the amazing stories that come out of that. But you also, without pros now, you don't get that 2010 final in Vancouver against the U.S. and Canada. Now, this is all a different sport. But hockey's a lot more even. So if in the case of basketball, once the game becomes a little bit more international, you start seeing multiple superstars from individual small countries outside of the United States, then you might have a much closer, much better, just like all around more entertaining Olympic tournament when it comes to basketball. So I'm looking forward to the future. I'm looking forward to seeing this team just dominate, because that's what we're going to do. And to answer the second question, it's such a bummer that we're not going to have fans. But obviously, this entire Olympics has just been kind of a dumpster fire just since the beginning. And it's not necessarily Tokyo's fault. They got a really bad stream of luck with having to host an Olympics in a year that a global pandemic broke out and is still affecting things today. So it's going to be a bummer not having any fans, and it's going to really suck because we've started to see fans come back, and it's changed everything. It's made things so much more entertaining. The NBA Finals with packed stadiums has been unbelievable. Even when you go back to the Stanley Cup, like when in Montreal, they only had something like 20% capacity. It might have been lower than that for finals games. And then when they went back to Tampa Bay, it was a different atmosphere because every seat is taken by a rabid fan. And you won't get that at the Olympics. But like Gregor said, just the fact that they're even going off, mostly unfazed with the athlete's perspective, it's definitely a good thing for sports, for the Olympics as a whole. It would suck to just miss an entire 8 years without an Olympics. So it's really good that it's happening in the first place. It's just a huge bummer that there's no one there from the fan side that will be able to witness it.
Yeah, just to wrap this up quickly before we go to break. We're only 4 Olympics away from like Manu Ginobili's historic run where he knocked off the U.S. and then we had the Redeem team. So about the disparity, it's obviously there. The United States clearly dominates basketball. And I think the international, thing you talked about is so pivotal because we are seeing the growth is huge. This is Slovenia's first ever Olympics because of a Luka Doncic. And that sport is going to keep growing there because you have a face of the NBA from the homeland. So I think that's interesting. One more thing to clarify, the only reason I wouldn't want players playing in it is just to avoid another Paul George. I love when players represent the country and stuff like that. No one, especially the owners, should tell them what to do. I think that's ridiculous. I would hate to see a guy that I root for and stuff like that get injured in this because that Paul George injury, I think, had the potential to really change it. Maybe that could have been a turning point where pros started opting out and stuff. But, lucky enough, he's now made 100% recovery and everything like that. So, yeah, no fans, bummer, but I think we're all on the same page here. We're just really excited for the Olympics. So thank you, Quigs, for the headlines. You brought up the Miracle on Ice team. When we get back, we're going to have an interview with a member of that team, John Harrington. It's we talked about this, one of my favorite things I've ever done. You won't want to miss it. So stay right here for more.
To support the WFUV Sports Department, visit support.wfuv.org to become a member or make a one-time donation. WFUV Sports, home to New York's longest-running sports call-in show and the flagship station of Fordham Athletics.
One, New York's longest-running sports call-in show on 90.7 FM. We're joined by gold medalist, 1980 Olympic champion, and head coach of the Minnesota State University women's hockey team, John Harrington. John, thank you so much for taking the time with us.
Yeah, this is great. I'm excited to be on and talk a little hockey. I can never not want to talk about 1980, so it's great to be on with you guys.
Awesome. And so before we get into 1980 and some of the hockey stuff, we understand that the next few days you're part of a charity golf tournament for a miracle golf tournament with some of the other members of that 1980 team. Kind of just wondering, how did that all come together and what is the event all about?
Well, we just, I think what kind of got going was an idea that to build a monument of our awards celebration. I think everybody's seen that when our team is up on the victory stand and number one fingers up in the air and everything. And an artist was commissioned to create a bronze statue. And I think it was something that we thought like raising funds for and to get out in front of the arena right there. So people can see that and not only remember what happened there, but hopefully it'll inspire people and maybe there's others that see that, they go there and somehow that inspires them to be successful in whatever they choose to do. So what we're doing here is we decided to have a golf tournament, or I should say possibly more golf tournaments, but the first one here in Minnesota here to just get the word out there that they're raising money for this statue and having a chance to also get together with a lot of our players on our team. We're going to have 15 of the 15 players there from our team, and they'll be playing with different groups on the golf course and visiting and question and answer sessions and doing those things. And then we'll also have a number of our staff people that were there, and also Dan Brooks will be the son of Herb Brooks, our coach, will be there, and Ryan Suter is going to be representing the Suter family. Of course, his dad passed away in 2014. But we're excited about a couple of days of activities at Mystic Lake Casino in Prior Lake, Minnesota, and we're going to have a great crowd out there and a great contingent of our team. So we're excited about it coming up here on Monday.
John, thank you again for coming on today. You mentioned how many members of the team are going to be there for this tournament. Have there been reunions like this for you guys in the past, whether like it's in public or just for yourselves? Because I'd imagine this is a bond that's going to last between all of you forever.
Well, yeah, Dylan, I think, we've had some opportunities to try to get together the team. It's been very rare that we've had everybody be able to get to any particular thing, whether it's their schedules or whatever is going on. We've had, for the last, I believe, 5 years, we've had a fantasy camp in Lake Placid, but we don't get all our players there, but we probably get 10 or so, 10 to 12 that they come there and some play, some coach, some do both. And it's a really a fun time in Lake Placid. We had a 35th reunion in Lake Placid. And then also we had a 40th reunion in Las Vegas this past year, a year ago in February. And so we've had some occasions to get together, but not a lot. And I think anytime these sorts of things come up, our team really gets excited about them because we do get a chance to see everybody, to see our teammates and that we don't get to see too often. And I mean, it's always fun when we get that because, there's a couple questions about, hey, how are you doing? How's your family doing? How's the grandkids doing, for a lot of us. But then pretty quickly it goes right back to 1980 and everybody's taking the same barbs they took in 1980. Like everybody's heckling each other about the same stuff that went on in 80. And so we can get back there and relive 1980 quite well.
Staying on the topic of 1980, one of the things I find so fascinating is like the mental toughness you guys had to go through, because obviously, the upset of Soviet Union, it's special. Everyone knows that story, but that wasn't the end of the journey. You still had to go out there versus Finland and get that gold. So I was kind of just wondering, what was the mentality like staying locked in, the time leading up after the Soviet Union went into the gold medal match? How did you guys stay focused on the goal?
Yeah, that's that's right, Ryan. I mean, it's a lot of people, whether they thought that was for the gold medal or they thought that was even a semifinal, but it wasn't a semifinal to get to the gold medal game. I mean, the way the Olympics worked at that time was there was two groups of teams, 6 teams in each group, and you played everybody in your group, and then the top 2 teams from each group advanced to the medal round. But you also brought in the points that you had earned against that other team. So when we went into the medal round to play the Soviet Union, we had 1 point and Sweden had 1 point out of our group because we had tied each other. So we each had 1 point. And Russia had 2 points and Finland had 0 because Russia had beat Finland in the round robin. So going in, I mean, we weren't necessarily in first place, but we had to get points. So after playing Russia, I mean, we all understood what the format was. I think Herb Brooks, I mean, certainly quite quickly after that game against the Russians, I think the next morning in practice, we probably had as tough a practice as we had all year. And he just was on us about not thinking that everything was done and that we got to refocus and that you've gotten yourself to this position. And like he said, I mean, to take a couple words out, you'll take it to your grave. If we're not successful in this game, you've gotten yourself to this position. And, when he selected that team, obviously he selected it based on, certainly talent was one thing, but mental toughness was another. I mean, he had players he knew that could rise to the challenge, that had risen to the challenge in their hockey careers in the college ranks. And so he knew what drove us, and we knew where we were. We knew where we stood and what we had to do against Finland. And we could have lost to Finland and end up third in the tournament if we would have lost that game. It wasn't like we would finish second if we lost to them, because of Russia, and they did beat Sweden, they would have finished ahead of us too. So, but we knew what was, and we knew what was at stake. And Herb certainly reminded us right through that game how important it was that we were be ready to play.
Well, John, we appreciate you taking some of the words out of Herb Brooks' mouth and paraphrasing, considering this is a public radio station that we're going to be on. So that was kind of you to do. But staying on the topic of like staying cool in those moments, in the Soviet game, I'd imagine that was the most intense moment probably of your life. And you had you had the go-ahead assist in that final goal, if I'm not mistaken. So through the final minutes of this game, what's going through your head? What's it like on the bench? How are you keeping cool?
Yeah, I think the big thing was that we tried to stay as focused as we could as what we were doing. I think if you watch any of the live tapes, or even if you watch the movie Miracle where Kirk Russell's playing Herb Brooks, and for how much Herb in those last minutes was just play your game. Like, don't try to change things. Don't do different. We just need to play the way we've always played here and trust ourselves that we can be successful. I know when Mike Eruzione scored the lead goal there, and to go ahead 4-3, there was 10 minutes left in the game. The clock was at 10 minutes. And I think everybody on our team will say that was the longest 10 minutes they've ever played. And I remember like looking at the clock going tick, clock, tick. I mean, it was like it was not moving, and finally got to the point where I'm going to watch the game and not watch the clock. I'm just going to keep playing here and focus on what we're trying to do as a team and play together and play the way that we knew we could play that had gotten us to that situation. So, and I think most players would say that it was energy. Like, we understood it. The crowd was letting us know where we were at and what was at stake. So it was a lot of focus, but it was a lot of excitement as well.
Right. And so once you do beat Finland and you get the gold medal, you're playing in Lake Placid and stuff like that, you're seen as kind of a hero in the United States. What was it like those kind of days, weeks afterwards, soaking it all in? You're getting remembered, you're getting honored. How did that kind of experience play out?
Yeah, it was crazy. I mean, I think I've always said that after, and I think everybody would say this too, when you're there in Lake Placid and we're so busy like practicing and watching other games and trying to get to a couple other events if we could, playing our own games, having meetings. I mean, you really didn't have an understanding of what impact we were having on the rest of the United States. And so we were going about our business there. I think the first thing for me, I remember getting home, we went to the White House the day after the Olympics, and then we flew home. And I can't remember exactly what time my plane landed in this airport in another town by my hometown in Hibbing, Minnesota. But there was 500 people there in the airport with signs and posters and everything. I'm like, wow. I mean, it's the middle of the night, And these people are here because it meant a lot to them that one of their own from up on northern Minnesota had won the gold medal here. And all of a sudden, I mean, we were just invited everywhere as a group to be celebrated and to talk and to have, you know, sign autographs and do commercials. And it was like, wow, it was like, this really meant a lot to a lot of people. This really inspired people. This really made people feel better about the United States. I mean, it was a tough time at that time. I mean, it was a Cold War going on with the Soviet Union. It was, there was, you know, the gas shortages and everything else. It was a tough time in the United States. And I mean, to find out how excited we made people and positive, and it's like, hey, you know, if you work hard at something, if we all do this together, we can be successful at something. I think that meant a lot to a lot of people. And like, I'll just say it was really humbling to have people say that to you and feel that way and about something that we had accomplished on the hockey rink.
It's certainly an inspiring feeling, worthy of a Disney movie, I would say. And you mentioned Miracle earlier. Obviously, Kurt Russell played Herb Brooks. You were played by an actor named Nate Miller. We were curious if, you know, did you have any kind of relationship with Miller in playing you? Did you get any input? Did you know what the film was going to be like before it came out? And then, of course, what was it like watching yourself on the big screen? It must have been cool, but I'd imagine also rather strange.
Well, I mean, I think a couple of things. One, I'll say this about Nate Miller. At the time the movie was being made, I was coaching at St. John's University, a Division III school in Collegeville, Minnesota. And I had actually, I got a phone call one day and it's like, yeah, hello. And it's like, hey, coach, yeah, this is Nate Miller. And I like, hey, Nate, how's it going? I had recruited Nate to come to St. John's University when he was in high school in Minnesota. And he ended up going to play junior hockey for a couple of years. And then he ended up going to the University of Minnesota and ended up being a captain at the University of Minnesota for the Golden Gophers. And he said, hey, I want to know, I tried out for this movie and I'm playing you in the movie. And we talked a little bit, laughed a little bit. And he said, you know, could I call you at times and talk about things? And as this filming's going on and, you know, and have a discussion about what you did and what you said and how you act. I said, yeah, Nate, I said, certainly, you know. And I know one time he called me, and I always love this about the movie. He called me and asked me about, like, who did you listen to music and stuff, you know? And we were talking about that. And I said, well, I was a big Bob Dylan fan because I was from the northern Minnesota there. And Bob Dylan was from Hibbing, Minnesota, a little town not too far from my hometown. So I was a big Bob Dylan fan. And there was a part in the movie where Herb had me and my two line mates, the Coneheads, Mark Pavlich and Buzz Schneider and myself, in to talk to us about something. And Nate had a Bob Dylan T-shirt on, and I remember when we went to the premiere in Hollywood, and then I asked him about that, and he goes, "No, I wore that because you said you were a Bob Dylan fan." So I got a Bob Dylan T-shirt and wore that. But so he kept in touch, and I will say one of the this is the highlights of probably my St. John's teaching career. All the coaches at St. John's had to teach a 1-credit theory of their sport. So a theory of hockey. I had to coach theory of hockey. And when that movie came out and came to St. Cloud, Minnesota, I told my team, listen, I told my class, I'm getting a group rate for all these tickets. I'll buy them. We're going to go watch the movie. And then the guy that played me, I had talked to Nate, and he agreed to come up the next day to our class. And he and I could talk about the movie and then what happened actually, if it wasn't exactly true. And I'll tell you, we could have stayed there all day. The kids in my class loved it, and Nate was tremendous. And I run into Nate, you know, he's still doing hockey things up here, and I see him actually he's coaching with my son in youth hockey. They're coaching their little guys up in the Twin Cities suburb in Minneapolis, St. Paul up there. So I get to see him on occasion, and we have a few laughs about it. But I'll say, but for him playing there, my one good line about that movie is Kurt Russell. I always say Kurt Russell had a better appreciation for my talent than Herb Brooks did, because there was a part in the movie where Nate was actually on the power play. And I said, well, that never happened in 1980, but Kirk saw my ability and he had me on the power play in the movie. So that's kind of my one-liner about the movie and how it went. So.
John Harrington, 1980 Olympic champion, who we're joined by now. You just mentioned in the movie Herb Brooks, and I think something that was so great about the movie. Really emphasized the way the team played for him. What was it like for your experience that year? All the other times, what was it like playing underneath Herb Brooks?
Playing for him?
Yeah, playing for him.
Yeah, well, I mean, it was a challenge. I mean, he was a coach that really drove his players, and I think it was kind of more negative reinforcement with Herb. Like he could dress you down pretty good, but he knew he had players. He knew how far he could take players before they said, you know what, I don't want to do this anymore. And he didn't have that kind of players. He knew he had players that would say, oh yeah, well, I'll show you how I can play. So, I mean, it was tough. And I don't think when you talk to almost all of the players on our team, I don't think anybody ever felt comfortable that they were okay, that they were going to make the team. You know, he had to cut a few players to get to Lake Placid. We had a 26 member team when it got selected in the summer of 1979, but then it had to be cut to 20 players when we went to Lake Placid right before we went there. So he was, you always felt like you were playing with this hatchet over your head. Like, geez, if I don't play great in this particular game, I'm not going to make this team. But he was tough to play for. But I will say that after the Olympics ended and I got going in a coaching career, that he became a mentor to me as far as my coaching was concerned. Like I could call him and ask him about things and discuss hockey with him. And I never felt like I was that player that I was in 1980. I felt like I was, like he was somebody here that he wanted to do well as a coach now. And I always appreciated that about him and how much help he gave me when I started my coaching career.
John was about to ask you about your coaching career, actually. You're currently at Minnesota State, coaching the women's team there, correct? We were curious about the transition from becoming a player to becoming a coach. What is the difference in mentality? What's it like, having that kind of different relationship with the players that you would have with a guy like Herb Brooks? Just what was that like?
Well, I think first of all, I mean, coaching is something I always wanted to do. I mean, I think when I was, in high school and getting into college, I mean, that was my idea, that I would be a high school coach, that I would coach or teach high school and coach in high school and teach players the game. And I was really fortunate as a player that I got to play, for a very good high school coach, a very good college coach. I've coached with Herb Brooks. I played on the national team with Bob Johnson, from University of Wisconsin, one of the all-time great coaches in college hockey, and Stanley Cup winner too, when he moved on to pro hockey. I also played on the 1984 Olympic team, so I played for Lou Vero on the 1984 Olympic team. So I had a lot of coaches that I had played under and had a lot of different ideas, saw a lot of different ways players could be coached, and a lot of different ways of things that could be coached as far as systems of play and skill work. So I felt really fortunate that I had kind of a lifetime of a lot of different coaches and not had just played for one coach and was trying to take my coaching theory from that one person. Having said that, I think I would say that most coaches, when you get started, kind of coach like the coach you had the most success under, and that was Herb. So I was kind of hard on my players. I think when I first got my first head coaching job at St. John's University, I was really hard on my players, and I was tough on them like Herb was on us. You know what? I say this, that I think when my son got to be peewee age and Benham age in hockey, that he would come home and be down in the dumps about things, and you'd talk to him a little bit about it. And I don't know if he'd always tell this to me, but he'd tell it to his mom, and then she'd tell me that, yeah, he got, hollered at in practice today and stuff like that. And that he was just feeling kind of down about that because the coach was hard on him. And I think I kind of figured out then that even my players at St. John's have moms, and they care about how their sons are being treated. And I like to think, it might not have always happened, but I like to think that I changed a little bit and try to be more positive and more enthusiastic about what I try to teach, and find the positive things and not be so, like critical of when things aren't going well. So I like to think that I made a change at that time when my son got to that age and I saw how he was being treated, and I think you find out that those ways can be as successful or more successful if you coach that way. So like I say, I was lucky to have coached for a lot of different coaches, and I have been able to kind of been at a lot of different levels. Like I coached high school, was my first job for a couple of years. I was at Division I as an assistant coach, Division I men. I coached Division III at St. John's for 15 years. I coached in Europe for 3 years, coached professionally over there. And here I am. I'm coaching women in my coaching career. And when people ask, why did you want to coach women after this other, all this other coaching that you've done? And, actually it was kind of like, because I haven't. That's why. I mean, I've coached a lot of other different levels of hockey, and now it's an experience for me. I hope as much it is for the players that are playing for me, that they're having, that it's an experience for me of learning how to coach young women. And it's been, I don't want to say interesting in a way that doesn't sound good. I want to say it's just been interesting, and it's been a learning experience for me as much as it has been for them.
John, thank you so much for taking the time. Just one last question. So the Summer Olympics are coming up, obviously different, but just wondering if you had any message to some of the teams or Olympians who maybe they're coming in, they're underdogs, they're not seen like they're going to do much. Do you have any message or something you would say to them that could kind of get them going?
Well, I think the best thing you can do is, certainly you've got to enjoy the moment. You've got to understand where you are, what you've accomplished. It's accomplishment to get where you are. And it's like I've always said, you just got to do the best you can with what you have to the best of your ability. That's all you can do, and that's the way you can think and not look at it, am I going to be a success or a failure? You want to try to be the best you can be. If you're on a team sport, I know from experience in 1980 that we had tremendous individual talent, but when we played together, when our team played together, we were somehow better together than we were with the individual parts. We somehow, if you were to select me or a Russian player, you'd go, I'll take that Russian guy, and the same way. But when our team went together, we somehow got better than that other group. And I would say that to the team sports is that you need to play for each other, and you need to count on each other that they're going to play the best they can for you, because that's what's successful in team sports, is playing as a team.
Great. So thank you so much. That's all we have for you. We really appreciate you spending the time with us. Stick around, guys. We'll be right back with more one-on-one on 90.7 FM.
One-on-One has a brand new YouTube channel. Subscribe to WFUV Sports to catch our simulcast Saturday nights and get notifications so you never miss another show. Miss the show? You can find on-demand segments, interviews, and highlights every week. WFUV Sports, home to New York's longest-running sports call-in show and the flagship station of Fordham Athletics. It's WFUV and WFUV HD, New York. Listener-supported public media from Fordham, the Jesuit University of New York. right here on 90.7 FM, WFUV.org, and WFUVSports.org. This is One on One, New York's longest running sports call-in show on 90.7 FM, WFUV.org, and WFUVSports.org.
We're back here on One-on-One, New York's longest running phone show as we approach the 1 o'clock hour. And guys, we're going to talk some Euros. The championship match is set for tomorrow with Italy and England. It should be it's highly anticipated. It's obviously both clubs are searching for their first. I know Italy's searching for their first championship since 1966. So one of these two droughts will be broken. Before we get into that, I'm just kind of wondering, because I think the defense has been so crucial so far, and I want to know if you guys are kind of seeing the same thing. Do you think that it's the first time the tournament's been played with 5 substitutes? Do you think that has led to kind of the defense that we've seen? Because I think Italy's only given up 6 goals in 21 games. England has given up 1 goal this entire tournament. Do you think that's kind of playing a factor here?
I would certainly say so. Yeah, I mean, 5 substitutes being a factor is something that's going to give clubs like England and Italy an advantage, because their programs just run so much deeper, just because they've had that money for so much longer. So you're going to have more depth there. You know, unfortunately, a country like Denmark that has not really been on the international spectrum for as long, no matter how long they have been there, they may have talent, but they're not going to have that depth that England and Italy are going to have. But certainly defense has been such an important thing in this tournament, because specifically for these two teams we have left going, offensively, specifically in the last couple of games, they have not been stellar. I mean, you know, anyone who watched that England-Denmark game knows that, you know, England should not have come down to a penalty kick in the last couple minutes anyway. That was a poor offensive performance over the game for England. Their other goal being an own goal. It was just a whole bunch of things. Italy's got a lot of pop, but they're sloppy. They get called for offside a lot. So, you know, they can score with the best of them, but they're not particularly clean, and that results in them having to set things back a lot, and then it keeps them from scoring. So, you know, defense has been such a huge aspect of both of these teams' games in this tournament, and I would imagine the 5 substitutes is a huge aspect of that.
Yeah, I'd have to agree with Dylan's assessment there, because even despite the depth that England and Italy obviously have over a team like Denmark, even still, Denmark was still in that game, even when it came down to extra time. But you could see, even in extra time, England was kind of dominating the offensive possession for most of those 2 15-minute periods. And even though their only goal to show for it was off a penalty kick rebound from Harry Kane, they definitely dominated the ball in that the entirety of extra time. And that's certainly a credit to the ability for players to just last longer when you have, you know, guys coming in fresh in the late minutes of regulation time or even in extra time. So it's definitely making a huge impact on a game that in a tournament that's usually only seen, you know, the 3 substitute rule. So it would be hard to say that it has no impact whatsoever. And I don't want to overemphasize it, but it's definitely, you know, there's definitely very clearly an impact that is being shown. But as far as this game goes, I'm very interested to see how these teams respond to a couple of semifinals in which neither of them really showed their strengths very much. Obviously, Italy played a much larger force in Spain, you know, a 2-time champion in our lifetimes of the Euros and a World Cup champ in 2010. Spain's still, you know, a force, even if they're not, you know, that same core that brought them that dynastic run that they had in the early 2010s. But Italy really just didn't look like they were dominating that game the whole time. Spain kind of looked like the better team for most of that match. And, you know, Italy got that great counter goal early, which really set them up for, you know, a game in which they just kind of had to rely on their defense for most of it. And Spain, spent most of the tournament passing into infinity. So, it's difficult to, stop an offense that is just so, capable of holding the ball that long that they did, and were able to force penalties. So in the case of England, playing a team that's definitely not favored over you in Denmark, to come out kind of flat like they did, it's definitely an interesting way to head into a final in which they have not ever appeared in Euro final. So it'll be interesting how England responds to that, how they respond to having a home crowd, a almost full crowd at Wembley Stadium. And the only other time that they've ever won a major tournament, or the only ever time that they've played in a major tournament final, was also in England. So, look to see that crowd having a huge effect on the game, and Italy maybe, serving as the fan underdog, but have the better team in the tournament. It's going to be a great final, I think. And we've been blessed with fantastic finals in recent years, like the last Euro final with Portugal and France, and even the World Cup 2014, World Cup in 2010. So hopefully we get another classic out of it.
Yeah, it's interesting how much we want, like when we're looking at it, how much we want to overreact to the last game from England. Because if we do, then it's not a very positive outlook going to this final. You talked about Denmark does not have the talent they had. And we knew that going in. Denmark was they gave off Team of Destiny vibes a little bit. They've obviously overcome a lot of adversity, some scary health things there. But this game shouldn't have been as close as it was. It shouldn't have came down to, a lucky deflection in penalty kicks after a terrible one by Harry Kane. And so I think if you just look at it like that, then Italy should have the upper hand. Their last 33 games with Mancini at the helm, they haven't lost any. I think they're 28 wins, 5 draws. So clearly on Italy's side of things, they are peaking well. And I know they had to squeak by Spain a little bit, but certainly from the England side, you're going to need a guy like Harry Kane to step up. I don't think Raheem Sterling can be the one-man show he kind of was versus Denmark if they want to have a chance, because that defense in Italy is good. They are going, he's not going to be able to do it all himself. So I think when you look at it from that side, it certainly kind of points a little bit towards Italy having an upper hand here.
Yeah, in terms of who I think is going to win this game, I'm going to go with Italy for 2 reasons. I don't. It's going to be a close game, but I'm going to stick with the Italians for a couple of reasons. The first one being, it's not often in any sport that it comes down to a battle of the offenses, because we know how important defense is in championship tournaments, and that really goes, at least in my observation, for all sports, in my experience in particular. But I think both these defenses have been good enough that it will come down to the offenses. Italy's just better, I think. Like I mentioned earlier, they're sloppy. They are offside quite a bit and they get called back, but I just think offensively they're a more dominant team. Secondly, Thomas mentioned the fact that that this final is going to be in Wembley. The semifinals were also in Wembley. England's played every single one of their games in London. And I think that makes you feel a little too safe. I think England looked a little too comfortable in that game against Denmark for me, and I think that was part of the reason why it ended up being so close. So I think they're going to be a little too comfortable, and Italy's going to come in and take advantage of that. They're going to see a weak spot. They're going to see a vulnerability in England for that reason. So at least for me, I don't know about you, Thomas, but I'm going with the Italians.
I'm going to also go with the Italians. I know you went with the more analytical, actual on-the-field approach. And I'm just going to go with the historical approach, because England never can get it done. In '96, they hosted the Euros. They lost in penalties in semifinals to Germany. They haven't been back to a final. This is their first Euro final ever. It's only their second major tournament final. And they just constantly disappoint, the probably the craziest fans in football or soccer or whatever you want to call it. So just historically, they just always choke, and it's definitely a demon that they have to exercise. Maybe this is the place at Wembley in front of a home crowd, but based on their recent performance just in this tournament alone, it doesn't seem like they're thriving too much off of the crowd. And with Italy, they have played this tournament really, up until the semifinal, like Italy of the past, the 4 World Cup champions that we've seen out of them. They haven't won a Euro since the 60s. but that's not really indicative of their success because they've been so strong in the international stage on the World Cup scene. And, they're bouncing back off of a 2018 where they completely missed qualifying for the World Cup. So they have that in their back pocket. They're playing like a team that is, here because they want to win. They're not going to have any say over, or they're not going to take no for an answer when it comes to getting back to, the elite level that they're used to playing. So I'm going to stick with Italy as maybe the upset to the fans, not necessarily an upset skill-wise. Pretty evenly balanced teams, in my opinion, on the grand scale. But I think Italy has the advantage in this tournament, and they'll come up with the win, I believe, I'm going to say a regular time, maybe 2-0 victory.
So clean sweep here with Italy, which I think is rare when we're all kind of going. One thing I'll say to England's point with Spalletti turning his Achilles in the final versus Belgium for Italy, if England could capitalize on that, I know Emerson's replacement isn't great defense. So Sunday at 3, everything on the line for these two teams. We're going to shift to something where the stakes aren't quite so high, and that is the MLB All-Star Game. So we'll have Quigs on again for that to break it down with some headlines. After a short break, you guys are listening to One-on-One on 90.7 FM.
Be sure to follow WFUV Sports on all of our social media platforms. At WFUV Sports on Twitter, at WFUV_sports on Instagram, and WFUV Sports on Facebook and YouTube. WFUV Sports, home to New York's longest-running sports call-in show and the flagship station of Fordham Athletics.
All right, some more headlines for you guys. The MLB All-Star Game is Tuesday, and both league rosters have already been announced, but are constantly changing. 9 players have backed out of the game, including Jacob deGrom, Mookie Betts, and all 4 Astros representatives, despite making their league's rosters. Replacements were announced early Saturday, headlined by Tim Anderson in the AL and Max Scherzer and deGrom's teammate Taijuan Walker in the NL. What are your thoughts on these players skipping the game, and who are you glad to see replace them?
Yeah, well, different reasons for different things here. DeGrom, I completely understand. He's had a few injury problems. Huge second half for him and the Mets. If I was a Mets fan, I would be kind of thrilled that he's missing it. I know some of my friends are Mets fans. They love the news. Obviously, from a selfish baseball perspective, it does stink to not have a guy like Jacob deGrom start the game. And also, you have Woodruff and Gausman, who are scheduled to pitch Sunday for their respective teams. And so that eliminates them from pitching the All-Star game. Those have been the three best pitchers in the NL this year. So that is kind of a bummer there that we don't get them. But at the same time, as Dylan said on Nosebleeds Monday, we had a heated debate. It's just a game. And so it really is, obviously your team success is more important. You're not going to scratch a guy from pitching Sunday. That's crazy. So on that perspective, I get it. I also like it for that NL because it gives deserving guys an all-star nod. We had the same argument over, is Taijuan Walker an all-star, Max Scherzer, Freddie Peralta, three guys that were objectively had all-star-like years, but just the stack pitching in the NL left them the odd man out. It usually does even out. So that was something that I kept in mind, and it does this year. It evens out. You get Walker in there. You get Freddie Peralta, Max Scherzer, Walker Buehler. Four guys who had outstanding years who certainly any other year, they're all-stars. So from that perspective, it's good. And the Astros, though, that is something else. I mean, they all gave their own reasons. There's zero reason to give any of them the benefit of the doubt, so I'm not going to do that, looking at that track record. And they're cowards at the end of the day. I really do believe that. You have to face the music. You put yourself in this situation. They talk all the time about embracing it, and this would be an opportunity to embrace it. Stand up to an Aaron Judge in the locker room, Altuve, who you took an MVP from. This is a good spot to do that. And you don't see the Astros doing that here. It is kind of weak. For whatever reason, it's different for everyone. I'm not going to say that Altuve's leg doesn't hurt. I'm not going to dispute that Correa's wife is pregnant. I don't think I have the evidence to do that. So, they have excuses. They're fine, I guess. You don't have to play in it. Nothing wrong with it. But I would have liked to see them put their money where their mouth is and embrace both big creator themselves.
First of all, embrace what? I don't when they'll say oh, we should just embrace it. This is anything short of being ashamed of yourself about it is but that's just at least what I think of this. And of course we could be completely wrong about this. But the Astros have given us reason to doubt in the past. So I think it's fair to say. Now, in terms of guys stepping out of the All-Star game, I have no problem with it. The three of us and our producer Alex Walls and any young folks listening, hello, by the way, we all came of age in a time when the All-Star game, they tried to give it meaning. They tried to give it home field in the World Series. And I, from the very start of my life as a baseball fan, thought this is the dumbest thing I've ever heard in my whole life. It was really stupid, especially it seemed like baseball didn't know what they wanted because they wanted to have a representative from every team to make sure everybody was represented in this game. But they also tried to give the game meaning. It was just so pointless and dumb and stupid, and I'm very happy it's over. And it's for that reason that we don't have to worry about guys skipping out on the game. It's completely understandable. Now, as a fan of Jacob deGrom and as a fan of baseball on the national spectrum, I would have loved to have seen Jacob deGrom pitch in this game. Although I'm also a little worried that a whole nation who's been waiting to see him pitch on a national level all year wouldn't get their money's worth, considering he'd be pitching in Colorado and Jacob deGrom's given up 3 home runs in his last 2 starts. That concerns me. But nevertheless, it would have been cool to see him pitch in the game. Totally understand why not. Especially in an injury-prone year for him, as he's trying to maintain his full arm, truly. And what an incredible year this has been. And it's really cool to see his teammate Taijuan Walker get in the game. I was actually in the Mets press conference just last night as we record this, when Luis Rojas was the first to get to announce it to the media that Taijuan's going to pitch. That Taijuan's going to, but he also will likely get a chance to pitch in the game, which is wonderful considering how his schedule turned out. So that's wonderful to see. There's still some spots that haven't been filled yet, from my understanding, and there will probably be more people who drop out after we record this. It would be cool to see Taijuan Walker's other teammate, Marcus Stroman, also get a spot in this pitching staff because he's had just as good of a year as anyone else in the National League, Taijuan, who is not Jacob deGrom, we will say. So that's very exciting to see. But, I have no problem with players dropping out of the All-Star game, provided that every team does still have a representative of some kind. I think that's really what the spirit of the game is. I'm all for it.
Yeah, if I'm a Mets fan right now, I'm not mad. I mean, I guess that you're the best pitcher per season, of the millennium, maybe all time. We'll see. The season's been insane for Jacob deGrom. So you missed seeing him start on the mound for the National League, which is obviously a huge honor. It's fantastic when your guy is out there. I mean, personally, just seeing those clips of Pedro Martinez in the 99 All-Star Game brings me a lot of pride for being a Red Sox fan. But you also have to respect that he's kind of putting this, one day of glory, which he's had in the past. He's, been absolutely lights out in All-Star games in the past. And he's putting that aside to focus on himself and his team in their pennant run. So I can respect that. But I will say it's a bit of a loss for MLB in that you won't get, the best pitcher you've seen in 20, 30 years on the mound in your All-Star game. It's just like a great exhibition, a huge number of you watching, players that they've maybe never seen before. You're going to get a lot of people who aren't even baseball fans that probably tune into the All-Star game just because of the fanfare. And it's just awesome to see all these fantastic players. So from that stance, yes, it's a bit of an L for MLB. But back to the Mets fan, you get Taijuan Walker in the game, which is fantastic. Now you have 2 starting pitcher All-Stars in the game. So that's, for a Mets fan, that's awesome. So because of the Astros, I could see where this is a bit of a move of cowardice on their part. Obviously, they all have their own reasons. You definitely don't want to miss a child's birth for an All-Star game, especially if you already played in one. Definitely get in trouble for that. So I understand that. But when you go back to the whole owning the cheating, there is really nothing to own other than the fact that you cheated. So you're not a victim. They like to be the role of victim. And it's almost like, yeah, because you cheated and you didn't really apologize for it. So, I don't really understand where the Astros players are coming from that perspective. But it's unfortunate to see that a bunch of, very high-level big names like Mookie Betts, who didn't necessarily deserve to be an All-Star game based on this year's stats, but is still one of the most recognizable faces in the game. He'll be sitting out. But it's nice because it makes room for those snubs like Max Scherzer, who's had a 2.10 ERA, 12.2 K per 9, 3.09 FIP, whatever that is, and 35.5% strikeout percentage. I'm pretty sure the Washington Nationals tweeted those stats and compared them to Yu Darvish, who was voted an All-Star initially. It was named to replace some of those that opted out for the NL. But it's good to see that, some players that are deserving and did get snubbed will be replacing the that opted out. So that sense, nice, but also maybe it makes the All-Star allure a little bit less alluring because there's so many players that are now on the All-Star roster. But
can I say something really quickly? And I know this is going to get Ryan really mad, but it's one of my hottest baseball takes, and I have to say it. People talk about certain players not being deserving and getting named in the All-Star game. There are guys who have better WHIP or ERA plus or whatever stupid stat you want to throw. It's a game. I want to see my favorite. And it shouldn't be an accolade on a player's career. It really shouldn't be.
And let me say this: you wouldn't have found me in 2014, Derek Jeter's last year. You wouldn't have found me complaining about him not deserving to be an All-Star and starting the game. Yeah. Sure. So I get that.
Yeah, precisely. That's precisely my point.
All right, that's fair. But I will still, and I'm not a salty Red Sox fan. Maybe I am, but I will still, to this day, acknowledge that Mookie Betts should not be an All-Star. Now, moving on. The Home Run Derby will be Monday night, and the bracket was announced Wednesday. It's headlined by the current home run leader, two-way phenomenon, Shohei Ohtani, and the Mets' very own defending champion, Pete Alonso. Who are your guys' picks to win this year's MLB Home Run Derby title?
Let me just say that the Home Run Derby is my favorite kind of like side game out of all the major sports and all the different All-Star stuff they do. I like it better than all the All-Star games as well. It's like, to watch it is really something special. I love the new bracket format too. I know it's a few years old now, but while you're competing directly against someone, it makes it more intense as you're going on. The upsets are awesome. And so from that aspect, I'm super excited. And Colorado is certainly going to be – it's going to be amazing watching it there. There was something that came out the other day that obviously there's elevation there. As we talked about earlier, the ball always carries there. They usually put balls in like a humidifier or something to reduce the carry, but they're not going to do it for the Derby. So I have a feeling we could see some records shattered, and we do have the players to do that now. The stars are out in this Derby, and there's a few different areas that I look at here because you obviously have Ohtani, the 1 seed. He's been the story of 2021 baseball, right? And then you have Trevor Story. It would be cool if he won in front of the home fans. You know, disappointing year for the Rockies. He's probably going to get traded in a month. It would be a nice going away gift to gift him, give them a home run derby champion in front of those fans. And then the Trey Mancini comeback too is really, really something special. The way that he's battled through the toughest of times to get here, to be an all-star caliber player, be in the Derby. I would root for that for the story, but I'm actually going to go with Joey Gallo to win this thing. And, you know, I wouldn't be – obviously anything could happen. Like Juan Soto has 11 homers on the year. I don't know how he made the Derby. He could easily put on a show. It's that kind of special event. But Joey Gallo is the hottest hitter of the bunch in terms of hitting homers. I think he has 10 in his last 11 or 12 games. So, like, on that aspect, he is hot. When he gets into a ball, it is going to be gone. So I like him to be able to pull a ton of balls there at Coors Field. And I think he's the 2 seed right now. I would not want to face him in the first round. Tough match for Trevor Story if he's not able to give the fans kind of more than one round of happiness and cheers. But Joey Gallo would be my pick of the bunch. Not like I'm crazy confident anything could happen, but yeah, I think he's hot enough right now to where he could just put on a show.
Totally understandable. I'm actually of the same school of thought here of trying to go with someone a little off the radar, like Ryan is here, because to me, obviously there are so many cool things about this home run derby. Getting to see two-way Shohei play in a national game is just awesome. I can't wait for that. As someone who loves watching Pete Alonso and story in front of a home crowd. I love when guys win the home run derby. That's awesome. Trey Mancini is such a great comeback story. And all of that is actually why I'm picking Juan Soto to win this home run derby. If you look at derbies in the past historically, when there's this many crazy storylines happening, it's someone who's out of the spotlight who ends up winning the derby. This always happens. So that's just what I think is going to happen. That being said, we're going to have so many records broken, obviously, this home run derby, and that's going to be so exciting to see, and I can't wait to see it. And, either way, it's just going to be so exciting to see. And, I mentioned this near the top of the show, but getting to watch Shohei Ohtani, like I have Beatlemania over Shohei Ohtani, and I can't wait to watch this home run derby because of him. And I hope he pitches and hits in the All-Star game too. But we'll see what happens there. It's gonna be very exciting. Would love to see Shohei win. Would love to see Pete win back to back. Would love to see Trey Mancini win. Would love to see Trevor Story win. But I'm going to go with Soto.
No, like you guys said, there's plenty of fantastic stories that could come out of this home run derby. But I'm going to go with the most basic, least hot take pick of all time and pick the number 1 seed, Shohei Ohtani, the home run leader, to win this home run derby. But for good reason. If you watch his swing, it's just completely designed for a home run derby. Obviously everybody swings a bit of an uppercut these days because that's just how the game has evolved. But Ohtani's is the best. He just bombs balls that you don't even think that he should be hitting. Like, he hit some homers at Yankee Stadium that were like the one that was just very up and in, and he just laced it. That's, probably a function of the very short porch and right field that they have there. But, if these balls are not put in the humidor and we got that high elevation, no humidity. I don't know. It's going to be an absolute laser show. It's going to be fantastic. I would be very interested to see Pete Alonso win it, because I feel like it must be so difficult to win back-to-back home run derbies. And it's amazing that Yoenis Cespedes did. I mean, I can't remember if that was before or after they switched over to the time limit whole thing, but that's just like, how did he do that?
Yeah.
There's
Almost always they disappoint the next year.
I don't know. But I think it would be very interesting to see him do that again. I also agree that the bracket format is definitely so much better than the 10 outs. I didn't like it at first, but I definitely love it now because it's just so much more entertaining. The scores are closer. It's always down to like the last few swings. So I'm going to stick with Shohei Ohtani, though. I definitely would like to see Trey Mancini win it as well if my pick doesn't go through, because that would just be a fantastic comeback story through everything that he's been through in the past few years. So that's my take on the home run derby, and very excited to see what kind of records they break. Maybe we'll see a 600-foot home run. Maybe we'll see a 600. Like, I don't even think that's totally out of the question.
No, it's not.
Did you guys see? And as we record this on like Saturday afternoon, do you see the guy Shohei's home run from last night?
Ridiculous.
Oh,
that was just to wrap up here. I just had one more. Did you guys see the Shohei report that he hasn't taken batting practice once all year?
You guys, which is insane. I don't know how you do that as a hitter.
I mean, you don't know. I don't know anything that he does. It doesn't make any sense. There's no point in trying to justify it at all. So thank you, Quiggs, for the headlines. We'll be right back with an interview with Terry Cashman, the artist and the man responsible for the hit single Talkin Baseball. You won't want to miss it, so stay tuned for more one-on-one.
Be sure to check out all of our latest podcasts on WFUVSports.org or wherever you get your shows, including NFL Friday, Nosebleeds, Pick and Pod, 5 on 3, College Gridiron, and FUV FC. Also, our newest edition, Off the Air, diving into the station's legacy with its most prominent alumni. WFUV Sports, home to New York's longest-running sports call-in show and the flagship station of Fordham Athletics.
Welcome back into One-on-One, New York's longest-running sports call-in show. We are pleased to be joined by artist Terry Cashman as we celebrate his hit, Talkin Baseball's 40th anniversary. Terry, how are you doing today?
Doing fine.
Great. And so 40 years since its hit, obviously a great accomplishment. What gave you the motivation to come up with such a unique song that tied in 30 years of baseball history?
Well, the inspiration for the song came from a photo that was taken at Shea Stadium, and it depicted Willie Mickey, the Duke, and the Yankee Clipper, Joe DiMaggio, all walking in from center field, and the picture was taken of their backs. They were in uniform, so you saw the numbers 4, 5, 7, and 24, and that represented, at least 25 years of baseball in New York, with DiMaggio starting in the 30s and retiring in 51. But what hit me was that the other three, Willie, Mickey, and the Duke, all played at the same time, and all were three of the greatest center fielders who ever lived. And they played in the same city, which was amazing. And when I realized that, and I said, you know, the song is Willie, Mickey, and the Duke. And I wrote the song in 20 minutes.
Oh my goodness, 20 minutes. Well, Terry, again, thank you so much for being on the show. 40 years later, the song continues to resonate with people. What do you think it is about the song that resonates with people? And is there anything specific about it that really resonates with you?
Well, I think people remember, when it came along in 1981, the strike in the split season, and the names in the song. I grew up in the 50s as a teenager, and all the players that I named, and all the events that I named. The Whiz Kids, Bobby Thompson, and Yogi Berra, and Lazuski and Campanella. These are names that a lot of people remember, and I think they relate to those times and those players as much more innocent than what we have, what we have today, and billions of dollars that are flowing around, and players, getting money that's really almost should be unheard of, but it's not. So I think that people just relate to that time, and even the players that I mentioned in the '80s, Rusty Staub and Pete Rose. People relate to them as good people.
Yeah, so you released this song during the 1981 strike, as you just mentioned, and I think it's really interesting because that was an era when I would say baseball kind of ruled the sports world. It was the national pastime in the U.S., and I feel like recently it's possibly taken kind of a backseat to football. It's not really as popular with kids as it was back when you were growing up. Is there a reason you kind of think this is so?
Well, in the case of football, it's the gambling aspect of football. I think that draws a lot of people to football, and the fact that football is once a week, and now the Super Bowl has become a national holiday. It has become the number one sport, and baseball, is slow. It's something that you have to be into and really understand it and like it, for that reason. So it has taken a backseat to football, but in my day, growing up, baseball was it. Everybody had a favorite team, a favorite player, and went to games. I went to a lot of games as a kid, and I was lucky. I grew up in New York, where we had National League and American League baseball, so I got to know all the players in the game. People who lived in Detroit, they only knew really and saw only American League players. So that that was a big advantage for me.
Terry, before you hopped on the Zoom call, Ryan and I were just talking about the incredible amount of players and events you were able to intertwine into this song. And we were curious about, what was the creative process like of fitting all those things in while trying to have some kind of rhyming scheme, while also wondering, were there any specific players or events that you were not able to fit into it just because it didn't work?
As I said, I wrote the song in 20 minutes, and whatever came into my head, I was thinking about the song, and I went to sleep the night before thinking about those days of growing up in Washington Heights, and having a candy store on the corner where the newspapers would come up at night, the early editions, and everybody would go down to the corner and argue about baseball, what team was better and what players were, who's better, Yogi or Campy. who's better, Williams or DiMaggio? And mainly who's better, Willie, Mickey, and the Duke. So when I woke up the next day, I picked up my guitar and it just came out of me that then I'm writing about the 50s. So in 1950, the Phillies won the pennant. They were the Whiskers. In 1951, Bobby Thompson hit the shot heard around the world. And, Yogi Berra was an iconic, great catcher, who had a famous picture. There's a famous picture of Yogi reading the comics. And, so it just came out of me, all of it. I really didn't think about it. The only thought that I had to get Rusty Staub into the song somehow because he was a very close friend.
Yeah. So you just brought up all those different players, Yogi, Willie, Mickey, and obviously those are baseball heroes. Those are legends. Do you think for today's younger fans, those kind of, you look at the past, the nostalgia, it's such unique with baseball because the history is so rich. Do you think that these kind of heroes and stars of the past can kind of play a role and a present in growing the game to younger fans today?
Hopefully, but I think that it depends on the relationship that kids have with their father. If the father, passes those names down to the kids, who is the man? Well, the man was Stan Musial, and look him up. He's one of the greatest players who ever lived. And something like that. In fact, I was at a game at Yankee Stadium, and I was sitting in the stands, and in front of me were a father and son, and the song came on at Yankee Stadium, and it was very rewarding for me because the father started telling his son who these players were that I was naming. So that was a great thrill, and it actually brought tears to my eyes.
That's wonderful. Terry, in a similar vein, we were curious if you were to write, let's say, another verse or a whole other version of this song right now and try and make it about the current stars and heroes of the baseball landscape, who would be some of the players that you'd want to particularly emphasize and some of the events that you'd really want to take note of?
Oh, well, I'd have to think about it, but, certainly DeGrom is becoming one of the great pitchers of all time. And now we'll have Ohtani. I could find something to rhyme with Ohtani. And his partner in the Yankees, Mike Trout, certainly great players. I have to look at all the names, and see, what the nicknames, if they have any. Today, they don't have the nicknames that the players used to have.
Right. And so, one of the reasons I was really happy we got you on is because you've obviously followed the game for a while now. And the last 40 years, just looking at when you came out with the song, the game has changed so much. The way players approach the game, what teams emphasize, what they look in players. I kind of wanted to know, what was your opinion on how the game has progressed throughout your lifetime?
Well, because of the pandemic, they've come up with a couple of things. One of which I like. I like the idea of not having so many extra innings. The ghost running on second base. It's different, but that's okay. Basketball brought in the 3-point play. Football brought in the 2-point conversion. And, those things have made those games better. And the one thing I don't like this idea of 7 games. That's a joke. But they're trying different things, and we'll see what happens. This whole thing with the sticky stuff is interesting, and I think it's hurting a few pitchers, mainly on the Yankees.
Terry, something I wanted to ask you about, just as a big fan of The Simpsons myself, I wanted to ask about the spoof Talkin Softball that you wrote for the Homer at the Bat episode. What was it like, kind of revisiting your process and trying to make a spoof, and what was it like working with the creative minds at The Simpsons?
Well, they were terrific, and they wrote most of that because they knew what they wanted to say. So they wanted me to sing it, so I flew out to California and worked with them and recorded the song. And that particular version brought a lot of kids to the song. And I've been told by people that their kids loved my song because it was on The Simpsons. So that was great. They were terrific. They were very nice.
Yeah, just taking it a step back, because obviously you're such a fixture in the game of baseball with all the different songs you've written and performed. And so where does this one, Talkin Baseball in particular, rank as like a career accomplishment moment accolade for you?
I've written a number of hit songs, including Sunday Will Never Be the Same, which I wrote with one of my partners, Gene Stilly. But this is special, I wrote it, I sang it, I produced it, and it has a special place in American history. So I would say that the Talkin Baseball, which has become a phrase that people use all the time now, and I think I invented that. So really making the Talkin Baseball, I think, holds a high place for me.
Certainly your variations on the song are something that people have particular affinities for too. Whether that be Talkin Yankees baseball or the different versions you've done for different teams. Do you have a particular favorite alteration of your song?
I think the Cardinals version is my favorite, and they were like the Yankees. That was an easy one to do because they've had a great history. They've won a lot of World Series. They've had a lot of great players. You met Stan the Man, and Rogers Hornsby, and Bob Gibson. They've had many MVPs, and that was an easy one to do. And they're trying to think of a line. There's a line in the song about St. Louis being another Cooperstown because they have more Cooper. So I enjoyed, as a writer, I enjoyed that kind of thing, and hopefully people picked up on some of the nuances of the song.
Just to follow up on that last question, did you on your own decide to do it for all 30 teams after the success, or did they approach you and ask you to come up with one?
No, I was approached originally by the Atlanta Braves. I had performed the song at the beginning of the second half of the split season. They invited me to go to Seattle to perform the song and sing the national anthem. And people, with the Mariners asked me if I could put a couple of their players at the end of the song. I said, sure. And I put a couple of players in the Mariners in the song. And people in baseball heard about that. And the Braves invited me to sing in Atlanta. I guess it was Turner Field. A fellow named Larry Cantor, who worked for the Braves, said, do you think you could write a whole song about the Braves and call it Talkin Braves or Talkin Atlanta or something like that? And I said, I'll try. And it was hard because the Braves originally were the Boston Braves. Then they became the Milwaukee Braves. Then they became the Atlanta Braves. So, but I managed to do it, and they paid me for the song. And then other people in baseball heard about that I had written this one for the Braves, and they paid me to write for the Cubs in Minnesota and San Diego and so forth. And after I had done about 10 different versions, I said, I'll do all of them. So I set out and I accomplished the feat of doing every team.
Awesome. artist Terry Cashman, the man behind Talkin Baseball. Thank you so much for taking the time with us today.
Thank you, Terry.
Thank you. Lots more coming here on One-on-One. Stick around.
To support the WFUV Sports Department, visit support.wfuv.org to become a member or make a one-time donation. WFUV Sports, home to New York's longest-running sports call-in show and the flagship station of Fordham Athletics.
Welcome back into One-on-One. And so for our last segment of the day, we thought we'd end on a light note. And with Space Jam, A New Legacy to be released Friday, we won't have another show before then. So we thought, why don't we end with just kind of some thoughts on Space Jam, what we want to see in the new movie, some predictions. And I guess I'll start off because I have a very strong take and I just want to get it out there. I don't want anyone to steal it. I need this to be known that this is how I think this will go. And so somebody tells me that LeBron's Toon Squad will win the game. Just a weird feeling tells me that, but I think it's not going to end with the buzzer beater. Jordan in his movie, it ended with a dunk from half court or whatever. I think this movie ends with a LeBron chase down block. Because obviously probably his signature play of his career is the chase down in the 2016 finals versus the Warriors. So instead of being, a prototypical ending, like just a normal buzzer beater or whatever, fadeaway, I think he's going to win it with the chase down block. And I think that's what'll set it apart. So kind of just open the floor. What are some of the things you guys are looking for?
Well, first of all, to your prediction about a chase down block, I can understand why you think that. But from the perspective of someone who's making a movie, a family movie, I think anything that is not anything that isn't a game-winning buzzer beater isn't going to do it. I mean, like, little kids aren't going to see LeBron end the game in the chase down block and go, oh, well, that is his signature move. It is that signature move that he did against the Warriors there. So that makes perfect sense.
The recording has stopped.
I think it'd be silly. Now, in terms of what I think is going to happen in the game, I actually think it's going to go to overtime. I think it's going to look like the Toon Squad have won it, but it's going to be so they're going to call off a buzzer beat or something. They're going to go in overtime. And I think Lola Bunny is going to score the final points, and she's also going to lead the team in scoring. Those are my opinions.
There are definitely some interesting takes. I kind of agree with Greg Ware on the chase down block thing because that was just like, that is his defining career moment. MJ's is like, believe it or not, I mean, outside of, his buzzer beater shots to win championships, I think the thing that people recognize most, and probably because of his brand, is him just in the air. He's Air Jordan. He's dunking. Obviously, he didn't actually dunk from half court in the NBA, but he did it from the foul line in the dunk contest, and that was awesome. And so obviously they had to recreate it, lengthening his arm a little bit. for that dunk at the end of the original Space Jam. So I think that actually is kind of an interesting take, and maybe they do that. I will be honest. I watched Space Jam last night for the first time in my life. Granted, I wasn't born when it first came out. But I'm going to be a little bit of a Debbie Downer here and say that I don't know if it's really that good. I feel like people very much overrate this movie. Maybe that's just me 25 years later, just saying, oh, well, the animation is stupid that they have like actual people right next to like cartoons that are kind of 3D, but they're kind of not, but they're not even really trying to make them look too 3D. So it looks a little weird, but obviously that's going to be fixed in this new movie because, we've come a long way in the animation side. So after I watched the preview for this upcoming film, I was a little bit, I don't know. I wasn't as excited. But now that I've seen the original Space Jam, I feel like this one might be better just because it has so much talent in it. There's a lot of big names on that Goon Squad. So I'm actually going to predict that the Goon Squad wins because how could you bet against them? They have a ridiculous amount of star talent on that team, and you're facing cartoons. Like, let's just use our brains here for a second. Obviously, these massive goon, I don't even know what they are, but they're aliens, right? And they're just stacked. They have the appearance of Anthony Davis and Damian Lillard and Diana Taurasi. These are all legends on the court, and they're facing off against cartoon animals and one human that wants to kill one of the animals, but some reason they put that behind them when they're on a team together. This is, of course, Elmer Fudd and Bugs Bunny. But regardless, I think that it's going to be, a blowout. So I'm not taking the Toon Squad because, they have one win in the past, but they were with MJ. He's the GOAT.
A blowout? You think LeBron's going to go down that easy?
Yes.
Wow. So hand up, I'll admit, I watched Space Jam for the first time in a long time yesterday too, just to kind of get a refresher on exactly, everything that went on. And I didn't remember how good Lola Bunny was. I'll say that right now. I think she is the X factor in this game because we know LeBron's going to get his, right? But you need other people to create shots. And that's what she was able to do. I know that in the original, they were getting blown out at halftime, but she was able to kind of get some nice buckets, get a good rhythm, and it allowed them to get the confidence to take the secret stuff, to get back into it. So I think if LeBron wants to get his son back, which I think is the plot of this one, they capture his son, and so they're playing a basketball game for his son, obviously, like one does when your son gets kidnapped. So I think that when you look at that, you're going to need other people to step up. And so, I'll get into some funny props for a second because we talked about this in the pre-show and stuff, that there are lines and you can actually bet on who's going to play well, which is crazy. And, I don't understand how that works, but that is who I would take to be the leading scorer in this one, maybe even over LeBron. I don't know.
Well, before I say anything else, Thomas, I don't mean to be overreacting or mean about your opinion about the first Space Jam, but I think it's a horrible take and you're stupid for thinking it. Now, here's my thing. As I also said earlier, I also think Lola Bunny is going to lead this game in points, probably followed by LeBron. That's probably a safe take. I think, and this is just a pure moviegoer prediction, I think there's going to be some kind of Daffy Duck time plot line where he's overly confident, as he tends to be. I think he's going to lose his confidence during the first half or something. Someone's going to give him some kind of motivational speech, and then he's going to go off in the second half. That's what I think is going to happen with Daffy Duck. I don't know. There is no basis for this opinion of mine. I just think it's going to happen.
I will say if a single player on the Goon Squad refers to Lola Bunny as doll.
Oh, it's over. It's over.
And so if that happens, yes, I'm going to take her as the lead scorer. But in any case, I don't know. It's an uphill battle for sure. And I'm very excited to see what Daffy Duck brings to the game because I think personally he was the highlight of the original film, which, you know, take it or leave it. It's a sports movie. Sports movies are rarely good. I've found that sports movies, they just don't measure up to like normal movies where the quality is. Usually the sport is somewhat simplified, and it's like I get it so that everybody can like the movie. It is a children's movie, I will say that, but I don't know. I don't. Sports movies just aren't. They never live up to my expectations. So for that reason, maybe Space Jam's better than I'm giving it credit for. But Space Jam 2, I will be watching now that I have the basis of knowledge of this first Space Jam. And I'm very, very excited to see if the Toon Squad has any answer for the absolute dominance that they will be facing in the fight for LeBron's fake son.
Game 6 Clay, Masked LeBron, Hoodie Mello, Lola Bunny when you call her doll. I mean, you brought that up. If she gets called doll, you may as well flip your opinion because she is going to go off. And also, Quigs, I mean, if we want to micromanage and dissect every single sports movie, you may as well throw out your childhood because they're not meant to be, I get annoyed at this at times too. They're not meant to be, obviously. The movie Draft Day comes to mind. I get so mad at some of the references. I mean, what is that draft capital? What are you giving up to move up 3 spots? But at the end of the day, we have to remember, especially for Space Jam, it's a kid's movie. I mean, the sporting, when you have LeBron or Michael Jordan playing with a ton of cartoons, I give him credit for making the game as realistic, I guess, as it could be. I don't know.
Yeah. To me, this would be like watching West Wing with someone who worked in the White House. It'd be like, oh, well, that's just not, that wouldn't be fun at all. That would be so, they'd be like, well, actually what you're saying. And I was like, get out of here with your stupid facts. I don't want that. Like, I really don't care about, especially in funny sports movies. All I care about is what is fun. Like Caddyshack. I don't care if it's accurate to golf. Happy Gilmore. I don't care. I really don't care. Space Jam is a perfect example of there's not too much basketball heavy stuff. What they took was this national knowledge that Michael Jordan made to play baseball. They took the unbelievably funny personality of Bill Murray and the Looney Tunes, and they made a movie out of it. And I just think that's fantastic. So, Thomas, I'm sorry, but I think you're so incredibly off the mark. It's like not even funny.
All right. Well, I guess I'm barking down the wrong tree, but I will switch the topic just for the few minutes that we have left, because I want to know if there's any sports/athletes that you would maybe want to see in a Space Jam in another sport. Say, what I was thinking, and I was racking my brain for charismatic athletes that are still playing. That would be great roles. And honestly, watching the match this past week has made me think maybe a golf movie in which Phil Mickelson,
wow, that's a great take,
our MJ/LeBron, might be quite interesting. He's a funny guy. He was funny that entire time. He's very, very, very charismatic. And golf movies are good. Caddyshack is good. It's not a good movie, but it's very entertaining. It's highly entertaining. So golf movies, they're good. So
yeah, you might have just saved yourself this segment with that Phil Mickelson take because that completely flew over my head. But especially after watching the match, he's corny enough, I think, that it would work. And you need that aspect too. You can't have a guy that just isn't corny enough or whatever. Like a Mike Trout couldn't ever be the lead just because he doesn't have the personality or anything like that. And I mean, if we're looking at parallels, it would make most sense, I think, if you look to football because it's the most popular sport in America. And it hurts me to say this. I refuse to say his name earlier. I'll say it now. I think it'd have to be Brady. I think he also has that kind of, funny side, that corny side to where you don't think so?
No, his Twitter is run by handlers. He is not funny. If you think he's funny, go watch his SNL appearance in 2005. There are some good skits, but it's not because of him. It's certainly not.
Well, the Twitter thing is what really gets me. And if you can show me proof that he doesn't run his Twitter, then I'll rescind it. But at the same time, he was handicapped for 20 years like Bill Belichick. We're finally letting him loose. He's throwing the Super Bowl trophy around. He's having a good time. He's drinking tequila. I mean, I think this is a new Brady that we're seeing in Tampa.
Okay, you ready for some comedy 101 here? If you are a first-round quarterback draft pick who wins a ton of championships and is decently handsome and is married to a supermodel, there is no way that you are ever in your life ever going to be funny. It's never going to happen. That's just the rule. That is the rules of how comedy works. It's just it's It's not a good looking people's game.
Who's your athlete? Who's your athlete, Tom?
Who's my well? It's a good question because there are a lot of funny athletes. I think Tiger Woods in his prime would have been great for a Space Jam type movie. There's a lot of witty baseball players, but I don't think they're popular enough to.
Yeah.
There's plenty of football players who have the personality to do it. So there's a whole different bunch of people. I think what could be great for a third Space Jam film is having a whole bunch of different athletes from a whole bunch of different sports in some type of Space Jam Olympics. I think that'd be hilarious. But at least that's just what I think.
Okay, great. Last thing here before we wrap it up, we have the GOAT conversation too much. We're not going to go there. But if LeBron's Toon Squad scores more points in this game than Jordan, can we make the case? Can we make the case?
It's a completely different game.
Yeah, no, the game has changed. The three-pointers.
Game. They're going to be shooting more threes, obviously.
Yeah. No. Okay. So that was fun, guys. I think that'll just wrap it up, honestly. So Special thanks to our guests, John Harrington and Terry Cashman, for spending some time with us. If you miss any part of the show, be sure to check out highlights or the whole show on the YouTube page or WFUVsports.org. The sports director at WFUV is Bobby Chaffardini. And thanks, as always, to our great producer, Alex Woltz. Thomas quickly with the headlines. And my partner, Dylan Balsamo. I'm Ryan Gregware. Enjoy the rest of your night. One on One is a production of WFUV Sports.